Welcome to Fiction Audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, like and subscribing would be greatly appreciated. If you have any recommendations for novels, comment below.
Please join my Patreon at https://www.patreon.com/fictionaudiobook.
Chapter 105, Chapter 104 Meeting with Pepper. The corridors of Stark Industries rarely felt tense. The walls were glass, the floors polished marble, and wealth hung in the air like a shield against discomfort. But today, beneath the quiet hum of electronics and distant footsteps, something restless stirred. Pepper Potts moved with practiced calm. She walked quickly but not hurriedly, clipboards pressed tight to her side, ID badge visible but unremarkable. The tension lived beneath her skin, unseen. In her coat pocket, the compact drive pulsed faintly, one of Stark's, loaded with enough stolen data to burn a company to the ground. Her heels clicked softly as she approached Obadiah Stane's private office. She had minutes, at most. Inside, the terminal glowed like a snake's eye. Supply manifests, black contracts, and weapons logistics were routed through subsidiaries no one was supposed to know existed. Worse still, blueprints. Not just for bombs. For armor. For something dangerously close to what Tony had built in that cave. She inserted the drive. The progress bar moved slowly, crawling toward salvation while her heartbeat climbed toward panic. The door clicked open. Miss Potts. Obadiah's voice was as smooth as the scotch he favored and twice as heavy. He smiled like a man already certain of victory. Pepper straightened, masking the drive's presence with calm professionalism. Mr. Stane. I'm just here to pick something up for Tony. Obadiah's gaze slid, unhurried, to the terminal. To the files displayed there, armament lists, prototypes, supply chains tied to places Tony Stark had publicly renounced. His smile didn't fade. The room simply grew colder by degrees. You're diligent, he said. One of your better qualities. He stepped closer. Pepper didn't retreat. Tony wanted these files. Of course he did. Obadiah's voice held no anger. Only certainty. But it would have been better if he'd come himself. This room holds too many secrets. She met his gaze without blinking. I'm just following instructions. He didn't stop her from taking the files. I hope you have a good day. His words were soft, almost dismissive. Same to you, Mr. Stane. Pepper left without looking back. Below the office, the reinforced doors opened for Ruka Arde. She moved with purpose, flanked by two figures. Brock Rumlow stood beside her, calm and unreadable. His posture remained perfect, movements economical. Kara trailed behind, notebook clutched too tightly, eyes scanning everything like a trapped animal. I'm here for my appointment with Miss Potts, Ruka said. Reception frowned. I don't see you listed for today. Then call her, Ruka replied. We spoke yesterday. She will remember. The receptionist hesitated but nodded. I'll notify Miss Potts that you're here. Please, wait. I would prefer not to wait long. Across the lobby, Phil Coulson watched through reflective glass, eyes narrowing. He knew Rumlow, knew him well. The man wasn't supposed to be anyone's bodyguard, let alone this girl's. Kara, too, he filed away. Uncertainty demanded observation, not action. Pepper nearly collided with Ruka as she stepped off the elevator. Kara stiffened. Rumlow subtly shifted into a shielding posture before catching himself. Oh, MS. Ruka Arde, she said. We had a meeting. Concerning the acquisition of a chemical plant. Pepper blinked, memory catching up through the fog of her crisis. Right. That message. The factory. Indeed. They fell into step together, Kara and Rumlow trailing silently behind. The elevator doors closed. Inside, the lighting was soft, the buttons glowing faintly like embers waiting to burn. You seem tense, Miss Potts, Ruka observed. Difficult negotiations. Pepper forced a smile. Long day. It will be shorter if we conclude our matter now. Ruka's tone remained light, but her meaning was firm. You have the paperwork prepared? Pepper didn't answer immediately. The elevator climbed. Lights flickered briefly, routine scans. Luthar's seated systems registered their passage. Confirmed. Logged. The doors opened onto a quiet, neutral conference room. Inside, Pepper produced the file, a simple transfer of industrial rights to the chemical plant. Nothing glamorous. Nothing strategic. Just an old site she didn't fully understand but was happy to offload. You're sure you want this? Pepper asked. Ruka signed the documents without hesitation. Quite sure. If you give it more time, we can find you a better facility. You're getting a lot of liability with this one. I'm aware of the situation. It's old but usable. As for liability, I don't think we need to concern ourselves. Pepper closed the folder. Then, done. Lily Ruka rose, her expression unchanged. We won't trouble you further. As they exited, Pepper exhaled slowly. I really don't know why Tony is acquiring things for you, but you shouldn't push too far. In just the last week, you've spent 20. This is merely compensation. If you have any concerns, you should speak to Tony. Lily Ruka said. Rumlow opened the door without a word. Kara followed, pale and silent. Coulson watched them leave. His eyes lingered not on Lily Ruka, nor Rumlow, but on Kara. Fear marked her steps more than discipline now. That looks like trouble, Coulson murmured. Yep, Pepper said quietly, already moving toward her next problem. Once we sort this out, I need to ask Tony why he's buying things for them. As Lily Ruka exited the building, she placed the call. Her words were precise, her tone flat. It's done. The chemical plant is under our control. On the other end, Luthar's voice is filtered through, calm, mechanical, unimpressed. That is good news. Anything else I need to know? Minor things. Shield is sniffing around. Stark's assistant looks ready to collapse. Something's moving beneath the surface. There was a pause. Then, with faint sarcasm. If you wish to amuse yourself watching men in flying armor beat each other to death, you may follow her. Otherwise, come back. Lily Ruka's lips twitch, the faintest ghost of a smile. Understood. I'll return. See that you do. The line cut. Kara said nothing, though her expression screamed questions. Rumlow watched the streets, calculating threats. Neither mattered. Lily Ruka stepped into the waiting car without another word. Orders were ordered. Above them, in the shimmering towers of Stark Industries, another war was about to begin. Chapter 106, Chapter 105 The New Beginning. Tony's home felt empty, stripped of its usual warmth by exhaustion and betrayal. His breath came shallow as he fumbled with the battered prototype arc reactor in his chest. His fingers shook, barely able to hold the tool steady. Everything burned, the hole in his chest, his pride, and the bitter knowledge of who had done this to him. Obadiah Stane's words still hung in the air like smoke. This is your legacy, Tony. The door had closed with finality. Pepper wasn't here. Rhodey wasn't here. Even Jarvis was silent. Refusing to accept defeat, Tony dragged himself inch by inch toward the lab. He wasn't done. Not yet. Not by a long shot. At Stark Industries, Pepper Potts moved with determination, though beneath her calm exterior, fear coiled tightly in her chest. Coulson walked beside her, the ever-neutral mask of S.H.I.E.L.D. professionalism firmly in place. 2 agents followed close behind, weapons holstered but hands never straying far from them. Their destination lay deep beneath Stark Industries, a hidden research and development sector Tony had never sanctioned. A secret Obadiah had buried beneath layers of deception, like rot beneath marble floors. This lab won't be on any official record, Coulson remarked as the secure doors slid open under Pepper's clearance. It's not, Pepper confirmed. If I hadn't stumbled across the paperwork myself, I wouldn't have known it existed. Inside, the shadows loomed heavy over rows of prototypes, military-grade hardware, exoskeleton schematics, and fragments of armor not unlike what Tony had built to escape Afghanistan, but colder. Hungrier. At the heart of the room stood the monstrous Iron Monger frame. Unfinished, yes, but unmistakably brutal. Coulson's gaze hardened. Looks like we can add another crime to Mr. Stane's list. Pepper said nothing. She pointed instead to the consoles still active, data bleeding across the screens like a confession in code. Copy everything, Coulson ordered. We'll bring it back to S.H.I.E.L.D. for analysis. If Tony had been here, he might have called them thieves for how they moved. Coulson's people worked like vultures picking over a carcass. But while Tony wasn't here to stop S.H.I.E.L.D.'s agents, there was someone else still in the building ready to stop these S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. In a different control room meant only for him, Obadiah Stane watched through layers of glass and monitors. Cameras fed him angles of Pepper Potts and the agent crawling through what he considered his territory, like rats fattening themselves on scraps. He didn't move to stop them. Not yet. They thought themselves clever. Breaking into his secrets. Pepper Potts would walk out thinking she'd won. The agent could write his reports. It wouldn't matter. Not when his Iron Monger would remind them of the price of theft. Obadiah's gaze lingered on the Iron Monger suit, resting in its frame like a beast waiting to wake. The reactor installed now pulsed steady and strong, stolen from Tony. He inhaled slowly. This wasn't some tantrum over corporate control. This was survival. Power. The world didn't need visionaries. It needed men who could hold power in their hands and wield it without trembling. Obadiah pressed a code into the console before him. Below, automated arms began to release the clamps binding the suit in place. Hydraulic systems hissed as plates shifted, locks disengaged. Soon. He turned from the monitors and walked to the chamber where the Iron Monger waited. His steps were slow, deliberate. His breath measured. Inside, assistants, men bought with promises and fear, stood at attention. No words were exchanged. They knew. He had no time for speeches. He stripped off his coat, rolled up his sleeves. The harness lowered. Metal wrapped around flesh. The machine accepted him as though it had been waiting all this time. Obadiah's fingers flexed within the gauntlets. His heartbeat synced to the HUD flashing alive across the screen before his eyes. Power surged through the cables into his limbs. His lips curled in something close to a smile. Not yet elegant. Not yet perfect. But more than enough. Through the feed, he caught one last glimpse of Pepper Potts walking briskly toward the elevator with the agent. It was time to end the game. Miles away, beneath the thinning veil of twilight, Lily Ruka Arde watched Los Angeles blur past the car window. The city moved unaware of them, just another black vehicle in the current of traffic, another quiet hand closing around something fragile. Kara sat silent, pressed small into the far corner of the seat, her notebook clutched tightly to her chest. Rumlow drove with habitual precision, attention split between the road and the quiet alerts scrolling across Stark Industries' compromised networks. Luthar's algorithms worked unseen beneath it all. Observation was a given. "We have what we came for," Lily Ruka said at last, mostly to break the silence. "A decrepit chemical plant for refining promethium. Now we should think about producing something actually worthy of the term weapon." "It'd be smarter to just steal Tony's arc reactor tech," Rumlow remarked, eyes never leaving the road. "It's safer than promethium. Cleaner than plasma. More stable." "Then perhaps you should suggest that to him yourself," Lily Ruka murmured. She wasn't about to provoke Luthar. The tech priests might not slaughter over every slight, but suggesting his technology wasn't good enough would be dangerously stupid. Kara flinched as something boomed in the distance, low, metallic, unnatural. Rumlow's eyes narrowed. "Looks like we've got trouble up ahead." Ahead, the skyline fractured. Something vast moved between buildings, shedding sparks like embers from a forge. Iron Monger, Obadiah's grotesque answer to Stark's genius, stomped into view, monstrous in scale, its reactor burning with stolen life. A smaller figure darted around it, repulsors flaring, Tony Stark, alive, fighting. The car skidded to a halt as Iron Monger hurled a massive piece of machinery. It crashed into the street 2 blocks ahead, sending civilians screaming and scattering. Kara made a small, terrified sound. Lily Ruka recalled Luthar's advice. "If you desire entertainment, you may stay and watch 2 men try to murder each other in flying armor. Otherwise, I suggest you return." Even without staying at Stark's building, she'd found herself exactly where 2 men were trying to murder each other in flying armor. She sighed inwardly. She had believed this world to be safe. No monsters. No adventurers. She hadn't brought a weapon. Now all she could do was pray and hope these 2 fools didn't accidentally kill her. "Careful. Drive fast," Lily Ruka instructed, voice steady. Rumlow was already reversing, pulling them clear with practiced efficiency. Kara finally spoke, voice small. What is that thing?" "Just a power suit," Lily Ruka answered flatly. She couldn't help noting how the red one looked cleaner, more advanced. More refined. It felt superior to anything she had at her disposal. Behind them, the battle escalated, flashes of light, screams, and the roar of explosions, announcing to the city that a new beginning had already begun. Chapter 107, Chapter 106 Disaster from the Sky. The night reeked of scorched metal, smoke, and death. Fires still burned across parts of Los Angeles as Stark's ruined office smoldered beneath floodlights and shields tightening perimeter. Drones circled overhead, scanning wreckage, bodies, and faces. Agents moved like clockwork, their orders clipped and merciless. Iron Monger's monstrous frame still lumbered in the distance, locked in a brutal battle with Stark himself. Orders snapped through radios. "Too many casualties. This mission is a complete failure," Coulson reporting flatly to Fury. "Requesting martial law. Lock down the area." SHIELD pulled bodies from the wreckage, there was little else left to do. This night wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. A new game on a board no one had been prepared to play. Far from the floodlights, beneath the broken husk of their overturned car, Lily Ruka Arde pressed a bloodied hand to her side. Kara huddled nearby, silent, trembling, her notebook crashed against her chest like it could keep her safe. Rumlow crouched behind the smoking wreckage, pistol drawn, ice cold and sharp as he watched the chaos ahead. The fight had found them. Obadiah Stane's Iron Monger had come crashing down from the sky, torn apart by the icing problem Stark had predicted. The machine had landed like a meteor, throwing debris, flame, and death across the street. Their vehicle had been caught in the blast radius, flipped, broken, bleeding smoke into the night. Now Iron Monger stood again, firing wildly. Missiles exploded without discrimination. He wasn't aiming for them. He wasn't aiming at anyone in particular. He was simply lashing out, enraged and wounded, trying to kill Stark and hitting everything else by accident. One blast tore the road apart, not 20 feet from where they hid. Shrapnel screamed through the air. Rumlow pulled back without flinching. Kara gasped as rubble collapsed somewhere nearby. "We need to move," Rumlow said flatly. "Not a suggestion." "No." Ruka's voice was hoarse but firm. "Moving now will draw his attention." "Wait. Find the opening first." "You really think there's going to be an opening?" Rumlow said, not taking his eyes off the chaos ahead. "We're just trapped like everyone else and bleeding, and I've got 6 rounds left. Not exactly a winning hand." "Then don't waste them." Ruka's voice was strained, but sharp. "If you can't fight them, just try to survive." Rumlow gave a dry, humorless snort. "Funny. Thought you were the one bleeding out. Then you can just run. If one of us makes it out, that's enough." Rumlow's lip curled faintly. Still giving orders while half dead. Impressive. Someone has to. You're not exactly stepping up. Through the pain, Ruka pulled a cracked device from her pocket. Blood smeared on its surface as she pressed it against the concrete. A weak light blinked on, barely alive. Its signal whispered into the void. A simple beacon. A location ping. Sent to Luthar. Kara's frightened eyes turned to her. "Even if he decides to come, wouldn't it take too long?" Ruka didn't answer at first. Then, quieter, "If he wants to save us, he'll come. If not, we die here. Either way, I've sent the signal." Ahead, Iron Monger fired again, missiles obliterating another structure. Civilians screamed. Fire devoured wreckage. The machine's wrath had no direction, it simply destroyed whatever stood in its way. Rumlow's hand rested loosely on his pistol. Stupid way to die. Getting caught in someone else's war. "You can run anytime." He snorted. "I'm not stupid enough for that. If you die, Luthar would not let me go." Ruka said nothing more. Her blood pooled steadily. Kara stayed silent. The lights failed. Static crawled across broken stone and steel. Radios bled whispers in languages not meant for human ears. Machine voices chanted in corrupted hymns, numbers, codes, invocations stitched together by logic older than this world. Reality buckled. Then it shifted. Luthar arrived. Not with thunder. Not with spectacle. He stepped forward as if the world parted out of duty alone, crimson robes stirring though there was no wind. Servo arms flexed behind him, patient, silent. One hand gripped a chain blade, resting idle. Behind him followed machines. Servo skulls drifted like carrion birds, bone-white and marked with erased barcodes. They whispered in binary, scanning the ruins with reverence. Mechadendrites uncoiled from his back, tipped with tools fit only for violence or industry. 10 of them. Freshly made. Chanting machine code beneath breathless skies. Their weapons did not glow. They simply existed, awaiting orders. Luthar surveyed the ruin without interest. "Pathetic," he said. No one had asked. His voice, layered with augmetics, carried effortlessly through the silence. It did not need volume to demand attention. He passed Kara as if she did not exist. Past Rumlow, whose pistol remained drawn but pointless. Past Ruka, bleeding beneath a broken stone. His gaze turned upward, through ruin, smoke, and sky. "You are too optimistic. Going out without weapons is stupidity in its purest form." Servo skulls spread outward. Glyphs flickered across the dark, unseen by human eyes. "Next time, at least carry a chainsword. Or a standard firearm. Had you worn armor, these injuries wouldn't have happened." Rumlow's grip tightened on his weapon. Luthar didn't even glance his way. "You're a disappointment," Luthar said coldly. "Your reaction speed, your enhancements, all superior to Captain Rogers' profile. Yet here you are, injured without even fighting the enemy directly." Kara said nothing. Rumlow lowered his gun, face unreadable. Even he understood the shame of it. Captain America would not have been caught in someone else's crossfire. Ruka exhaled faintly. "Can we save the lecture for later? I feel like I'm dying." Luthar's glance told him otherwise. The injuries were serious, but far from fatal. His disappointment remained. Getting injured in someone else's battle was beneath those he allowed to serve him. Rumlow understood his place. Luthar didn't care for his pride. Luthar didn't need to. Reality closed behind him like a wound sealing shut. Lights returned. Shield scans read nothing. Drones found silence. Heat signatures registered 0. Only rumors would remain. And somewhere beyond this ruined night, the machine prayers had already begun to fade. Chapter 108, TPM Chapter 107 Ends of Iron Mongers. Smoke still hung heavy in the air. The ruins trembled beneath the weight of distant explosions, even as Iron Monger's rampage slowly faded into silence. Luthar stood unmoving amidst the pleas, his servo skulls fanning out to can everything with mechanical precision. Lily Ruka remained at the same place. Her breathing sharp, her side still bleeding. Kara clutched her fist, her notebook already missing, eyes wide as she stared at Luthar as if unsure whether to fear him or fear the flying skulls behind him. Rumlow, half slouched against the car, said nothing, his expression unreadable beneath bruises. Luthar's optics whirred softly as they adjusted, scanning the wounds with inhuman precision. His mechadendrites moved, precise, methodical, to retrieve 3 small vials from a compartment concealed within his robes. Each vial shimmered faintly, unnatural light bleeding through glass that wasn't glass at all. "This is inefficient," Luthar said flatly, breaking the heavy silence as though it were merely another malfunction to correct. "You should not require my intervention for injuries this trivial." He didn't wait for their permission. The first vial he pressed into the Lily Ruka's hand. A prototype reconstruction, developed through knowledge I received from Mayak. Whether it functions in this world remains uncertain. His tone was that of a scholar recording observations, not a healer offering comfort. "Drink it." Lily Ruka muttered a curse beneath her breath about how he could at least pretend to ask nicely, but obeyed regardless. The liquid burned down her throat like ice and lightning. For a breathless moment, nothing changed, then warmth flooded through her veins. Pain dulled, wounds began knitting closed with unnatural speed. Her eyes widened. "It works, here." Luthar's gaze did not flicker. "We will verify consistency." He turned next to Kara, who hesitated but obeyed with trembling hands. The second vial vanished down her throat, and with it, the terror in her expression ebbed, warmth chasing away the ache, clarity returning to frightened eyes. Rumlow took the third without comment. He swallowed it like he would any bitter medicine, with contempt for weakness but an understanding of necessity. His bruises faded, bones aligned beneath flesh, torn muscles pulled themselves whole beneath his skin. Luthar's gaze swept over them with clinical detachment. "Looks like at least it's working, so we can start planting herbs for these potions." Kara, still breathing hard, spoke in a whisper. What even is that stuff?" "Healing potion," Luthar replied simply. "But I am not sure if it would have any side effects for you guys." He turned away, servo limbs retracting, mechadendrites curling back beneath his robes like slumbering serpents. His optics refocused on Rumlow, cold and exacting. "Your performance was terrible. You know, I am even thinking about replacing your hands with some weapons." Rumlow said nothing. He met Luthar's gaze, unflinching despite the clear insult. "At least then it would make sense for you to not carry weapons," Luthar said, already turning back toward the flickering tear in reality he had come through. His servo skulls began to chant in binary, preparing the extraction. Lily Ruka forced herself to her feet. "Come on, who would think there would be a giant robot coming down from the sky and crash on our car?" Luthar did not answer. He simply made his way toward the Iron Monger, who was currently beating up Iron Men, though Tony would no doubt strongly disagree with the statement of getting beaten. The ruined streets twisted with fire and broke beneath Luthar's boots. His servo skulls drifted at his flanks in perfect formation, their machine prayers murmuring in binary code as they scanned the battered battlefield. Tony Stark's repulsors sparked weakly as he struggled beneath the brute strength of Stane's mechanical monster. "You think that toy will save you, Stark?" Obadiah's distorted voice snarled from within the armor, heavy with malice and frustration. "I built this for war, unlike you who just wanted to use his armor for the show of." His words didn't matter. Luthar wasn't listening. The Iron Monger's sensors caught the sudden presence. Red optics flickered toward the robed figure approaching without fear, without urgency. Warnings flashed in its HUD, but Obadiah ignored them. Another civilian. Another fool walking to their death. Luthar's gaze met Iron Monger's lenses without emotion. He stopped precisely 5 paces away. Then he moved. It wasn't fast. It wasn't dramatic. He simply took 1 step forward, straight up. Gravity became irrelevant. His form rose as if carried by some unseen force, mechadendrites coiling tighter, servo skulls splitting to form a perimeter. From beneath his crimson robes, the chain sword unfolded, whining softly as its teeth ignited with a hungry shriek of spinning steel. Obadiah barely had time to process the scene. Luthar hovered above him, not as an opponent, but as executioner. One motion. A precise, vertical descent. The chain sword bit into reinforced alloy, shrieking as it tore through armor, circuitry, flesh, sparks erupted, blood mixed with coolant sprayed the ruined concrete. Obadiah Stane died before his brain could register the pain, the Iron Monger split in half like it was made of plastic instead of steel. Both pieces crashed down with finality, the machine's reactor bleeding light and smoke. For a moment, silence reclaimed the street. Even Tony Stark lay stunned, his battered suit sparking as he pulled himself free from debris. His HUD couldn't make sense of what he was seeing. His mouth worked, but no words came out. Luthar said nothing to him. The chainsword retracted, blood and oil still dripping from its teeth. His servo-skulls formed a protective circle as he descended, boots touching ruined asphalt with calculated precision. Looks like the guy wasn't using good steel, Luthar said, as if reading from a checklist. That armor is a complete waste of resources. He didn't spare Stark another glance. His optics refocused on his own people, Lily, Ruka, Kara, Rumlow. Now we can go back. Rumlow exhaled, relaxing his grip on his sidearm. Lily Ruka leaned heavier on the wreckage, looking like she wanted to complain but lacked the energy. Kara simply stared, notebook forgotten, eyes wide with disbelief. Luthar turned, his servo-skulls already preparing for the next phase of extraction. I still have some unfinished discoveries. Behind him, the wreckage of Iron Monger continued to smolder, cooling in pieces like a butchered animal. Stark would live. S.H.I.E.L.D. would cover the mess. Civilians would speak in whispers of the red-robed machineman who killed a monster with one strike. And somewhere in the ruined city, the first seeds of a far stranger future had just been sown. Chapter 109, TPM Chapter 108 Tony announces I am Iron Man. The battlefield had grown silent. Where moments ago there had been chaos, now there was only exhaustion. Luthar stood over the bisected remains of Iron Monger, his chain sword still hissing with steam, its teeth dripping with blood and coolant. One precise strike had been enough to end the machine, a demonstration of brute force refined by precision. His optics remained fixed on the corpse of the machine as though it still might offer some pathetic final resistance. When none came, he simply turned away, disinterested. A few paces away, Tony Stark slouched against the fractured remains of a concrete support pillar, helmet retracted, chest reactor flickering weakly beneath scorched armor plates. His breathing was labored, but not panicked. His gaze flicked from the ruined husk of his enemy to the strange figure standing before him. You know, Tony rasped, forcing his tone toward its usual brand of mockery despite cracked ribs and blood loss, for a guy who dresses like the villain from some old movie you really know how to make an entrance. Luthar regarded him in silence, servo-skulls hovering at his back in calm, menacing formation. Tony's gaze dragged up and down the figure standing before him, the old rad robes caked in soot and ash, the tarnished metal plating bolted onto armor that looked one step removed from a junkyard. Rusted servo limbs clicked softly behind him, and the floating skulls didn't help the impression that this man had walked out of a museum exhibit on how not to build technology. You look like someone who is down for scrap just to clean up the street, Tony rasped, forcing a smirk despite the pain lancing through his chest. Though I guess if you're proud of wearing a pile of industrial junk, who am I to judge? And your armor is something I would have melted it down for components. At least then it might serve a purpose. Luthar said at last, tone devoid of humor or warmth. Tony managed a breath that could have been a laugh or a cough. Well, still better than your fashion sense, he winced as his reactor sparked again. Luthar's optics shifted, analyzing the weak pulse of the arc reactor embedded in Tony's chest. If you need a heart replacement, I can perform it. No anesthesia. No sedation. Within 10 minutes I would be able to replace your heart with a new artificial heart with a better efficiency. Tony gave a dry chuckle despite himself. Right. A little home surgery by a medieval priest, hard pass. It would solve your most issues. Luthar's mechadendrites flexed briefly, as if considering the procedure despite Tony's refusal. Tony leaned his head back, exhaling smoke. No need, I am quite happy with my current heart. Luthar said nothing. His silence was answer enough. For a moment, they simply watched the ruins burn, two men shaped by machines and iron, standing over the corpses of another man's hubris. You didn't have to step in, Tony said finally. This wasn't your mess. Luthar's gaze remained on the horizon. Incorrect. Your fight has endangered my investment. Tony snorted weakly. And here I thought you cared about me. I do not, I am only here because of Lily. Luthar's tone made it clear, sentiment had no place in this equation. Servo-skulls returned to their formation, circling like vultures over the dying battlefield. Luthar turned, mechadendrites retracting with mechanical precision. I hope your next confrontation does not require my intervention. With that, he strode to Lily and others, leaving only the stench of blood, oil, and burnt metal in his wake. Tony watched him go, shaking his head. Yeah, sure. Next time I'll schedule my near-death experiences better. The ruins swallowed Luthar whole. And in the silence that followed, Stark wondered, not for the first time, just how unprepared he was for this situation. The aftermath of the battle was quieter than it had any right to be. S.H.I.E.L.D. was already preparing to sweep through what remained of the battlefield, collecting wreckage, bodies, and technology with their usual efficiency. Coulson arrived late, as he often did, never for the fireworks, always for the cleanup. He found Stark leaning against the battered remains of the vehicle, armor hanging from him in scorched, broken plates. His arc reactor still flickered faintly beneath cracked metal, like a failing heart trying to pretend it wasn't tired. "Mr. Stark," Coulson greeted, professionally detached as ever. "You look like hell." "Yeah, well. It's been a long day." Tony's voice was thinner than usual, the weight of exhaustion catching up now that the fighting was over. "Did Fury send you to scold me, or just to make sure I didn't bleed out on government property?" Coulson's expression didn't shift. "Both, actually. And to remind you, S.H.I.E.L.D. is already rewriting the narrative. Officially, this was an industrial accident. A tragic malfunction. Your involvement will be downplayed as much as possible." Tony gave a humorless smile. "About that? You would need to hold a press conference." Coulson already know the answer. Stark Industries would also need to make some statements. "Yeah, well. They work for me." Tony straightened with a wince. "Just your classic old-school press briefing. Fool the public, keep them smiling." Coulson gave him a long, unreadable look. "That's what we're worried about." They left it at that. S.H.I.E.L.D.'s people would handle the debris. Stark's people would handle the media. Between them, no one would handle the truth. The next day after the press conference, the drive home was quiet. Tony let Happy do the talking for once, which mostly meant silence and the steady hum of tires over streets. The city looked worse in the dark, like something had been torn open and hadn't figured out how to stitch itself back together yet. Tony leaned his head against the window, watching ruins pass. "I am Iron Man." The words replayed in his head, looping like bad radio static. Too late to take them back. Too late to regret them, if he even wanted to. It felt right. Honest. Like pulling off a mask he'd been wearing long before he ever put on the suit. They'd all told him not to say it. Pepper. Rhodey. Even Fury, with all his cryptic warnings and shadows. Play the role. Protect the secret. Don't make yourself a target. And yet, here he was. "I am Iron Man." It was a confession and a challenge wrapped in the same sentence. A promise or a mistake? He wasn't sure yet. He doubted he'd have time to figure it out. By the time he reached home, what was left of it, the sun was threatening the horizon. Dawn burned pale against smoke and ruin. Jarvis greeted him with the same calm efficiency as always, as if half the house wasn't in pieces. "Welcome home, sir. I trust your evening was productive." Tony gave a tired smirk. "You could say that. Prep the workshop. I've got some upgrades in mind. Shall I include medical scans in your routine, given your current injuries?" "Yeah. Why not? Let's see how bad it is." He stepped through the ruins like a man returning to his own grave. Somewhere above, the first reporters were already speculating. Somewhere below, S.H.I.E.L.D. was already rewriting history. And Tony Stark, reckless, bleeding, unbowed, was already planning what came next. Because the fight wasn't over. Chapter 110, TPM Chapter 109, Calculation of Furies with Lots of Paranoia. Tony Stark sat with a drink in hand, half-slouched in exhaustion as if the ruins of his home pressed down on his chest alongside his fractured ribs. He didn't flinch when Fury arrived, stepping over broken glass with his usual lack of ceremony. "You're lucky you're still breathing," Fury said flatly. "Though knowing you, you'll probably count this as a win." Tony gave a tired smirk. "It's been a long week. You are here to scold me about announcing I'm Iron Man, or is this about something worse?" "This isn't about you. Not tonight." Fury's gaze swept the ruined room, the damage still fresh. "We're here because of Luthar. That thing you keep supporting with resources." Tony's smile thinned. "Believe me, if possible I wouldn't give him a penny voluntarily." "Exactly the problem. From all the reports and intelligence we've gathered," Fury's tone hardened, "his technology is sometimes too advanced, sometimes too primitive. We don't know why he's here. We don't know if he's a friend or something worse. But what I do know, he's going to be a problem." Tony's fingers tapped against the glass, thoughtful. "He saved lives tonight. Saved me. For now." Fury's eye narrowed. "But ask yourself, what happens when his priorities shift? When you can no longer satisfy his hunger for resources?" Tony exhaled slowly. "So this is about control. This is about preparation." Fury stepped forward, looming as always. S.H.I.E.L.D. doesn't take unknown variables lightly. Luthar is a walking weapon. We're putting countermeasures in place. Contingency protocols. Surveillance assets. And if necessary, neutralization plans. Tony arched a brow. "You really think you can neutralize him? You saw what he did. I didn't see anything, but I heard he was carrying a simple chainsaw. Fury's stare didn't waver. I believe with you helping, we can develop something more effective for when the need arises. You want my help? Tony's tone sharpened. I want your awareness. You're already in too deep with him. Keep your guard up. Fury's words hung heavy in the silence between them. You're smart enough to build a suit of armor around yourself. Now think bigger. Build one for the world. Starting with plans on how to face Luthar if he becomes a threat. Tony's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. And what if he's not the problem? What if he really is just here to take over Mars? One person taking over an entire planet. Fury's smirk didn't reach his eye. That sounds ridiculous, unless he gets help from his world. I don't believe taking over that useless planet is possible without that. And if he hears you're making plans against him, Tony asked, voice lighter but edged with warning, you know how that'll end. I don't care. I still have cards strong enough to change the course of any war. With that, Fury left the place, leaving Tony alone with the silence, his glass, and the weight of another problem he wasn't sure he could outbuild. Tony stayed where Fury left him, glass still in hand, watching sunlight creep through broken walls and paint over scorched metal and ruin. The noise outside was dying. The ones inside, the ones crawling under his ribs, tightening in his chest, weren't so considerate. He didn't need Fury to remind him what he already knew. The first thing he needed to do was to prepare contingencies. Protocols against Mr. Luthar. He'd need to build his life on that logic long before he ever said, I am Iron Man. Tony set the glass down, untouched. Jarvis, pull up everything we've got on Luthar, and I also need information about Mars. Already compiling, sir. Good. And put something stronger in this glass. I have a feeling I'm going to need it. Far from Malibu's smoldering ruins, Luthar's stronghold remained untouched. Deep beneath layers of reinforced ceramic and shielding, where even radio waves struggled to penetrate, Luthar moved with mechanical precision through his sanctum. The battle had changed nothing in his demeanor. His movements remained methodical. His purpose is unshaken. Lily Ruka watched him from the corner of the room. She leaned casually against a crate half-covered in faded warning sigils, eyeing him with a mixture of suspicion and exasperation. You look even more terrifying than usual, she said at last, breaking the silence with the kind of boldness only exhaustion allowed. What's with the extra radiation shielding? Planning to go wrestle the sun? Luthar did not pause in his work. Mechadendrites adjusted valves, calibrated instruments, and locked in newly fabricated plasma cells. Exposure to radiation has exceeded safe biological parameters. The armor compensates. As for aesthetics, I was not the one who made this. You could have just said, I've been working with dangerous tech, this keeps me alive. She folded her arms. But sure. Keep sounding like a haunted toaster. It's part of your charm. One of the servo skulls let out a burst of binary static, which might have been laughter if machines had such things. Luthar finally turned toward her, lenses adjusting with mechanical focus. Imprecision invites misunderstanding. Clarifying parameters ensures comprehension. That is, preferable. Do you require further medical treatment? The potion appears to have resolved immediate biological failures. No. I'm fine. Lily Ruka exhaled. By the way, when did you start making healing potions? Yesterday. I acquired sufficient herbs before coming to this world. It would be inefficient to waste such knowledge. She snorted. Wow. So now you're a potion master? Seriously, I'm starting to think about getting a brain enhancement if it helps me learn things that fast. Luthar didn't respond. Instead, he moved to a large display projecting data in a language no one in this world could read, energy outputs, planetary charts, plasma efficiencies, and beneath it all, schematics of Mars. Her gaze sharpened. By the way, when are you planning to start taking over Mars? Once I've completed several plasma engines. The current subspace drives are inefficient in this world. So, how long is that going to take? Building multiple plasma engines, I mean. Luthar inclined his head. If I work alone, approximately 2 years. And what are we supposed to do while you're busy? Start planting herbs for more potions. That's actually a good idea. Having a good amount of herbs will help us a lot. His tone made it clear he wasn't joking. Lily Ruka sighed, rubbing her temple. You know, for all your tech, you're still just a guy who forgets normal people like having conversations that don't sound like mission statements. Luthar regarded her in silence for a moment longer, then returned to his work without comment. That's what I thought. She leaned back again, watching plasma coils hum to life. Instead of thinking, you should leave the room if you don't want additional limbs or tumors. The plasma engines will begin emitting high radiation levels shortly. With a grumble, Lily Ruka exited. She lacked anything resembling protective gear for what came next. The servo-skulls resumed their binary chant, the forge hissing with renewed purpose. Outside, the world burned in slow motion. But here, deep beneath the earth, another fire was already being prepared. And this fire would not ask permission before it spread. Author's note. Time to keep my promise. Big shout out to Dark Zoden and Vager Kalianen for hopping on board at the $5 tier. While I cannot promise anything else, for every person who joins for $5, I would give a shout out, as I do not have anything else, because access to all advanced 40+ chapters is being given at $1, and we have a limit of 100 people. $2 have unlimited spots, while they don't get any special treatment, but I really appreciate them adjusting because of unstable help. It's hard to write something extra for them. Chapter 111, TPM Chapter 110, Systems Not Yet Ready. The plasma engines hissed as they finally entered stable rotation, the glow within their cores reducing from violent storm to contained brilliance. Steam drifted through the cold forges of Luthar's sanctum as readouts stabilized across the vast displays of mechanical script. In this world where space does not exist, this technology and the engines would have proven their worth. Luthar stepped away from the console with measured precision, servo-skulls trailing after him like patient ghosts. His mechanodrites folded neatly behind him as he moved, shedding no wasted motion. Another milestone completed. Another foundation laid. Done frying yourself for today. Lily Ruka's voice carried from where she perched atop a crate marked in faded warning runes. Her tone lacked real concern, worn thin by days of watching him repeat dangerous processes with obsessive calm. The contamination is within acceptable thresholds. Luthar's reply was as cold as the forge's metal walls. Plasma output remains stable. Efficiency maximized under current planetary limitations. You could have just said yes, Lily Ruka muttered. Would have saved us both a headache. He ignored her. His attention had already shifted elsewhere. With a gesture, he summoned the interface of his system. An interface materialized in the air, something only he can see. Energy module, 70% energy capacity. Still not enough. While he can remotely control the Nexus gateway, the energy is not enough. If he wants to bring both goddesses, he would need to wait for at least a few more weeks. He regarded the numbers in silence. When are you going to finish? Lily Ruka asked, stretching with a yawn. For all that master of technology nonsense, you're moving pretty slow. Conditions remain insufficient. Resources incomplete. The barrier between realms requires more energy than I have. So. Mars first. Gods later. No, we prepare for Mars and then bring gods so we would have some extra help. The system flickered away beneath his fingers. It would progress in time. Everything did, given enough force, enough sacrifice. He turned then to less urgent matters. Holographic schematics bloomed anew, this time, familiar patterns of armor and weapons, scanned meticulously from Tony Stark. Where others might see innovation, Luthar saw flaws magnified. Weak alloys are prioritized for comfort and aesthetics. Redundant systems catering to human fragility. Power outputs are acceptable only in short bursts, ill-suited to protracted warfare or hostile environments. Inefficient, he murmured. Fragile. Unworthy of replication. Lily Ruka leaned forward, squinting at the projection. In terms of performance, it is still better than the current power armor I have. Your armor has a teleportation device, and it can survive all the chemical and radiation attacks. His mechadendrites flexed, dismissing sections of the design with curt, surgical movements. Tony's armor is good, but it won't survive a single virus attack regardless of if it's mechanical or made from some strange blessings. She snorted. He's still alive. Maybe don't insult it too loud. Irrelevant. Luthar closed the Stark files with finality. His focus shifted again, deeper into his archives, to the less visible aspects of his empire's foundation. Enhancement protocols. Chemical augmentations. Neurological adaptives. His agents, Rumlow, Kara, and the rest, were still too close to baseline humanity. He cannot redesign their DNA to make them strong, so there was only one thing he could do, replace their bones and muscles and give them more enhancement, probably a few more bombs inside their bodies, especially Rumlow. He definitely has a few nanobombs inside his brain and every part of his body, as he couldn't take the risk of a Hydra member getting that much enhancement and turning against him. Calculations flowed across his screens, dosages, thresholds, and projected failure rates. He considered options without sentiment. Compliance was loyalty, loyalty was best maintained through superiority. They'll break, Lily Ruka warned, watching him chart invasive procedures with clinical indifference. Even if Rumlow's is a bad person, don't push too far, and at least try to be gentle with my new secretary. My secretary having a secretary, that's interesting. His preparations continued uninterrupted. Augmentation chambers would be readied. New compounds synthesized. Weapons refined. Every asset sharpened, every tool reforged until it served his purpose without question, without weakness. Ruka sighed and slid from her perch. Let me guess. I should leave now before you irradiate something else. No need, my current work isn't dangerous. One of the servo-skulls emitted a burst of binary static, amusement, perhaps, in its own alien way. Ruka rolled her eyes but obeyed, vanishing through the heavy vault doors before the engine cycled again. Alone beneath the earth, Luthar watched the hum of his machines build toward a crescendo once more. The world above burned slowly in ignorance, but below, his preparations neared completion. The next day, Luthar led his small entourage through to the chemical plant they'd recently secured. A forgotten corporate venture, now it had been repurposed into something altogether more significant, though on the surface, it remained simply a factory producing experimental fuels. Rumlow trailed a few steps behind, his expression unreadable beneath dark sunglasses. Beside him, Kara followed, looking increasingly agitated as they passed through chambers alive with humming reactors and sealed vats pulsing with ominous blue light. This place gives me the creeps, Kara muttered, eyes flicking to the servo-skulls drifting silently overhead. Feels like we're working for a horror movie villain. You are, Rumlow said flatly. She glared at him. Maybe you misunderstand, and we are just working for a wizard who thinks he is using technology. As they reached the heart of the plant, a reinforced chamber lined with containment tanks and harsh industrial lighting, Rumlow broke the silence again. Fury wants a report, he said, voice casual but probing. He's asking what we're doing with this place. Wants to know if you're cooking up weapons or something worse. Kara's head snapped toward him, her posture stiffening in alarm. Are you insane? You're not supposed to say things like that out loud. Have you forgotten we're supposed to not reveal our identity in the mission, or are you just trying to get us both killed? Rumlow shrugged, unbothered. He knows everything already, it's better to be honest and let him know that we are not planning to rebel. Luthar regarded them both in turn, expression unchanged behind the impassive glare of his optics. Tell him the truth. It is a fuel plant. No more, no less. Fuel. Rumlow echoed, skeptical. A fuel factory that would be able to give us the best fuel a universe has to offer, Luthar clarified with the patience one might offer a particularly slow machine. Let him believe this. Let him feel he retains control. It will make him predictable. And when you're done building this, are you really going to show us your spaceship and tell us you're alien? Kara asked, folding her arms. Since Luthar already knows she is a SHIELD agent, she didn't mind asking questions openly. You better not call people aliens, or one day you might get killed. Luthar's mechadendrites flexed idly, tools clicking together with metallic finality. And showing you the spaceship I could have done by now, but it's so heavy it might just destroy the planet before it even enters the Earth's atmosphere. That sounds terrifying. It also means you don't even need a weapon to destroy the only planet with life, Kara muttered. Earth is not the only planet that has life, Luthar replied, already turning his attention back to the monitors. Progress was ahead of schedule. The engines would be complete within weeks. His next phase, enhancing his agents beyond human limits, would follow swiftly. You would need to assign new duties, he said, dismissing them with a gesture. I need this plant to start working next week. Rumlow gave a short nod, already moving. Kara lingered a moment longer, then turned away with a sigh, pulling her jacket tighter as if it could shield her from more than just the cold. Behind them, the machines churned on, indifferent to human worries. Beneath their feet, Luthar's cult grew stronger. Author's note, this would be the last chapter, but if you still want to continue, you know the drill, just go to the link below, and you get access to all 40+ advanced chapters. If you are thinking I just uploaded the chapter 151, if you have a suggestion or something to tell me, you can comment like always. Chapter 112, TPM Chapter 111 Picking Up New Workers. Warning, next 10 chapters are very dark, so it would be better if you avoid from chapter 111 to 120 if you do not mind, but a typical tech priest do then you can read, or I would strongly advise to avoid. The chemical plant had long since been abandoned to rust. The wind howled through broken vents, carrying with it the stench of old chemicals. Somewhere deep below, dormant machines awaited the touch of new masters. As the heavy doors creaked open, the factory greeted them with silence and stale air. Dust hung thick in the weak shafts of light breaking through cracked windows. Rusted machines sat inert beneath layers of grime, long-dead consoles showing no signs of life. No lights greeted them. No systems stirred. Only the faint echo of their footsteps moved through the hollowed bones of the plant. Servo-skulls hovered at Luthar's back, casting long, skeletal shadows on cracked concrete. He moved with mechanical precision, ignoring the ruin around him as though it had already been reforged beneath his will. Trailing behind were the others. So, remind me, Rumlow said as he eyed a rusting array of pipes that looked moments from collapse, how exactly are we supposed to make this dump into a functioning chemical plant? Even if the four of us work non-stop, it's not happening anytime soon. He kept his tone light, conversational. It didn't fool anyone here. Beneath the words sat calculation, the natural suspicion of a man who served two masters and trusted neither. Luthar didn't bother to look at him. Recruitment. Ruka, perched on an overturned chemical drum, raised an eyebrow. You mean hiring people? That would be dangerous. What if they leak the technology? I know you'd kill them afterwards, but that doesn't exactly undo the damage. We don't need workers. Especially not ones with a conscience, Luthar corrected. We need bodies. Healthy, alive. If we look in the right places, we'll find plenty. We can start with criminals, Rumlow said, a faint smirk curling his lip. Plenty of those in Hell's Kitchen. No one asks questions when they disappear. Hearing Rumlow's quick answer, Luthar decided he would not turn him into a mindless servitor. The men had quick thinking, and he himself had gotten the last batch of heads from Hell's Kitchen as well. Ruka shrugged, unbothered. Fine by me. Less paperwork. Besides, it's not like anyone's going to miss a bunch of bottom feeders. But Kara, the only one among them still truly loyal to S.H.I.E.L.D., stiffened. Her hands curled unconsciously into fists. You're talking about abducting people, she said, voice tighter than she meant it to be. Taking them and, what? Turning them into more of your machines. Luthar regarded her with the same dispassion he gave any malfunctioning component. Correction. They will not become machines. They will become tools. Useful ones. Ones that will help spread the blessings of the machine god. Nobody spreads blessings by turning themselves into half-machine abominations, she said, though her voice lacked strength now. I suppose someone requires additional education. Luthar turned away without further acknowledgement. At this moment, Kara truly wanted to walk away. But leaving wasn't an option. Walking away meant suspicion. Meant consequences from both S.H.I.E.L.D. and Luthar. She swallowed down the knot of fear rising in her throat and stayed silent. That night, the trio moved through the rotting backstreets of Hell's Kitchen. Their destination, a crumbling warehouse still clinging to life as a drug distribution point. Dozens of men moved inside, packing, dealing, smuggling. The perfect harvest. Luthar's orders had been clear: capture, not kill. Damaged goods served no purpose. Ruka smiled beneath her helmet, tightening the straps on her gauntlets as they watched from the shadows. Ready for some light exercise. Rumlow loaded a dart rifle with practiced efficiency, then checked the equipment. Non-lethal rounds. Gas grenades. Stun batons. He thought, if it weren't for Luthar wanting them breathing, this would be much simpler. Kara hesitated only a moment before preparing her own gear. Orders were orders, and it's not like she could refuse. If she did, she might join the ranks of these future workers. They moved fast when they struck. Gas canisters hissed through broken windows. Men choked, coughed, and collapsed. Those who resisted met shock batons and precision strikes designed to incapacitate, not kill. Within minutes, the chaos had been silenced beneath the hiss of respirators and the soft thuds of bodies hitting the floor. Steel containers, repurposed, reinforced, waited in the alley outside. Each criminal was tagged, catalogued, and loaded like cargo for transport. Alive, unconscious, ready for their transformation. Ruka leaned against a wall, watching Rumlow toss another limp figure onto a stretcher. Wow. You really do have some skills. Rumlow only nodded. We'll have our first batch ready before dawn. Kara moved apart, beneath the fractured remains of a street lamp, and sent her message in the dead of night. 2. S.H.I.E.L.D. Command. Subject: Unauthorized human experimentation, ongoing operation. Location: Hell's Kitchen, vicinity of abandoned plant number 47. Details: suspected mass abduction, forced augmentation. Request immediate review. The reply came faster than she expected. Acknowledged. Continue observation. No intervention authorized. Criminal losses are not our concern. Her stomach turned again. They didn't care. Not really. As long as it didn't touch S.H.I.E.L.D.'s precious optics, they'd let hell rot. She rejoined the others without another word. By the time they returned to the sanctuary, which was previously transformed from an observatory given by Tony Stark, the cargo had been secured. Rows of containers now lined the floor, hissing quietly as life support systems kept their contents docile. You can go and sleep for now, Luthar instructed, observing the hall without emotion. I will prepare separate rewards for each of you. Ruka stretched, satisfied. Well, you could add flight boosters to my armor next. Rumlow checked the seals on the containers. And if you're really giving out rewards, how about something close to Stark's armor? At least something more practical. Hearing this, Luthar's optics dimmed briefly in irritation. How easily humans misunderstood what true armor meant. Kara said nothing. At least one of them wasn't obsessed with Tony Stark's legacy. After dismissing the others to their quarters, it was rare to find anyone who remained sane after watching a human reduced to a servitor. Luthar returned to his work. The next phase could begin. Beneath his hands, the blueprints for augmentation chambers glowed anew. Machinery hissed to life, preparing to reshape flesh into something more durable, more obedient. Above, the world remained blind. Below, Luthar's war machine turned on. Author's note: this would be the last chapter, but if you still want to continue, you know the drill, just go to the link below, and you get access to all 45 plus advanced chapters. If you are thinking I just uploaded the chapter 157, if you have a suggestion or something to tell me, you can comment like always. Chapter 113, TPM Chapter 112, New Workers. Content warning. This chapter contains graphic depictions of forced augmentation, psychological torment, dehumanization, and surveillance consistent with the grimdark setting of Warhammer 40k. Readers who are sensitive as me to such content are advised to skip this chapter. The sanctum's deepest levels thrummed with a profane cadence, a mechanical dirge drowning out the feeble pulse of life. Buried beneath layers of ceramic and void-shielded alloys, where shadows clung like damp rot, the rite of integration unfolded with relentless, unholy precision. Servo-skulls drifted in silent orbits around Luthar, their crimson lenses slicing through the gloom, casting long, skeletal shadows across containment pods. Each held a body, sedated, twitching, flesh betraying faint rebellion against the violation to come. Their histories, thieves, gangsters, murderers, were erased. Now, only one metric matters. Viable for conversion. Luthar moved through the darkness, his mechadendrites coiling like serpents, their tips bristling with tools that whispered of pain, scalpels, neuroshunts, bone drills. Beneath his cowl, augmented optics parsed streams of data with mechanical indifference. Somewhere in the sanctum's recesses, a faint hum, almost imperceptible, emanated from a concealed device, its microlenses glinting in the dark. A listening probe, perhaps shields, perhaps caras. It didn't matter. Luthar's work was the Omnissia's will. No mortal scrutiny could sway it. Subject 01, male, 34. Criminal record, extensive. Physical condition, adequate. Cognitive resistance, minimal. Vital signs, erratic. He paused before the first pod. The men inside, once a predator in Hell's Kitchen's underbelly, lay splayed like an offering, chest heaving beneath sedation. Veins bulged, sweat slicked his skin as primal instinct warned of the horrors to come. He would have died forgotten, bled out in some fetid alley. Now, he would serve the machine god's eternal purpose. Initiate primary augmentation. Skeletal reconstruction. Neural purge. Begin integration. Mechanical arms descended, precise, obscene. Scalpels parted flesh with wet finality, exposing glistening muscle and quivering nerves. Bone saws shrieked, carving through ribs, spraying flecks of marrow across the pod's glass. Nanite swarms erupted from containment vats, hissing as they burrowed beneath skin, dissolving tissue to make room for alloy. The man's eyes snapped open, bloodshot and wild. His scream tore through the sanctum, raw and guttural, as the sedatives faltered. He thrashed against restraints forged for beasts, not men. Luthar's mechadendrites twitched, adjusting neural suppressors with a thought. He did not pause. The scream was irrelevant, fleeting, a glitch in process. The concealed device recorded every note of agony, a silent witness to horror. Heart rate, critical. Brain activity, chaotic. Pain response, unsuppressed. Screams crescendoed as titanium filaments wove through bone, replacing marrow with machine lattice. Synthetic sinew slithered through shredded muscle, stitching itself in place like parasitic worms. His voice broke into a rasp, then silence, as a mechadendrite plunged into his throat, severing vocal cords with surgical reverence. His eyes, still open, stared blankly as cortical implants burrowed into his skull, overriding thought with subroutines. What remained was a husk, lungs heaving by rote, a tool forged in torment. Integration, 53% complete. Subdermal plating, initiated. Vocal systems, excised. The sanctum swallowed his echoes. The device hummed on. Luthar moved to the next pod. Subject 02, female, 27. Physical condition, suboptimal. Cognitive resistance, high. Her emaciated frame bore scars of defiance. Lips trembled with whispered prayers to some forgotten god. As the arms descended, sedation faltered. Her eyes flew open, and a scream, sharp, defiant, laced with curses, shattered the silence. No. No, you can't. Her words dissolved into choking gasps as nanites flooded her veins, rupturing vessels to rewire flesh. Luthar's gaze remained on the data feed, mechadendrites adjusting sedatives with mechanical precision. Her screams fractured into shrill wails, then silence, as drills bored into her skull, grinding bone to dust. Optic implants replaced her eyes, their dull glow erasing all trace of humanity. The device captured every sound, her final, futile pleas preserved for unseen ears. Luthar noted its presence. Dismissed it. Cognitive overwrite, complete. Deviation probability, 0.0003%. Purpose assigned. He worked alone, as always. Not for secrecy, though the device's presence proved eyes watched, but because none could endure to see. Ruka's wit would break beneath these screams. Kara's fragile rebellion would shatter at this truth. Even Rumlow's cynicism would falter here. Only Luthar, forged in the machine god's doctrine, could witness such desecration and call it progress. Hours bled into silence, punctuated only by drills, nanites, and screams. Subject 04, a wiry youth, awoke mid-procedure, chest flayed open, ribs spread like a grotesque flower. His scream rose high, keening, as mechanical arms wove steel into his heart. Please. Let me go, I'll do anything, I'm. A mechadendrite silenced him, severing vocal cords mid-cry. Speech was unnecessary in tools. His body twitched, then stilled, as implants rooted themselves. Luthar did not flinch. Market-bought anesthesia failed, their pain would be corrected later, not now. He made a note to commission superior sedatives when time permitted. His own work would not be wasted on such trivialities. One by one, the pods emptied. From each emerged a servitor, pale, hairless, marred by steel ports and control nodes pulsing with cold light. Their movements were stiff, driven by subroutines etched into scorched synapses. Where men and women had screamed, now tools shuffled forth, shambling effigies, their suffering a silent hymn to the Omnissiah. Compliance, absolute. Tasks, assigned. Deviation, impossible. They would tend his machines. Guard his assets. Die as needed. Their blood would oil the gears of the machine god, their torment meant nothing. Luthar surveyed his work. His augmented heart untouched by the screams still echoing through data logs or the device's silent recordings. Satisfaction was flesh's weakness. He had transcended such folly. The listening device, whether shields or otherwise, no longer mattered. Let them hear. Let them watch. This was not cruelty. This was efficient. This was the Omnissiah's will, carved into a dying species. From flesh, weakness. Form machine, eternity. Above, the observatory's upper levels slumbered in ignorant decay, blind to the horror beneath. Below, in the sanctum where whispers bled into screams and flesh was forged anew, the future marched forward on obedient, bloodless feet, baptized in agony. Authors though, since someone wants SHIELD or maybe FBI to attack him, we need a solid reason. This chapter would give solid reason for any agency to attack him. Chapter 114, TPM Chapter 113, Silent Orders and Traps. The SHIELD secure briefing room lay in heavy silence, entombed beneath layers of concrete, steel, and secrecy. No windows. No signals in or out. Only the pale glow of screens illuminating the faces of those gathered within. Director Nick Fury sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable beneath the low lights. His remaining eye was fixed, not on his colleagues, but on the looping footage projected before them. Fragmented images flickered without sound, servo-skulls floating through streets, rows of containment pods, bodies half consumed by machinery, their faces locked in silent screams beneath sterile lights. Across from him, Maria Hill watched with a gaze like sharpened glass. Beside her, Coulson remained impassive as ever, fingers resting lightly on a tablet scrolling extracted intel. At the far end of the table, Alexander Pierce sat composed, his tailored suit as immaculate as the polite, concerned mask he wore. The footage shifted again, this time, a still frame pulled from earlier intel, one of the skull-like drones hovering above the Iron Monger's battleground, caught in stark relief against flames and ruin. No AI signature. No standard tech markers. Organic traces confirmed. Coulson's voice cut through the silence, steady despite the grotesque nature of the subject. What we're looking at isn't robotics. It's integration. Flesh and machine, forcibly combined. Hill's jaw tightened. These things shouldn't exist. Her gaze flicked to Fury. What Stark's been toying with is child's play compared to this. Whoever is behind it is a lunatic who needs to be put down before this spreads. Pierce leaned forward, fingers steepled. We've all seen worse in the files, Hill. Terrorist, madmen, even things we let slide when convenient. Why raise alarms now over a handful of missing criminals? Because it won't stay a handful, Hill shot back. You don't build infrastructure like this for a small operation. This is scaled for expansion. Fury said nothing. He continued to listen to the audio, a prisoner mid-conversion, screaming before his throat was severed with surgical precision. Then there was a separate video about a servo skull floating silently around the Luthar. We cannot act openly, Pierce pressed. We are a secret agency not officially on record. Exposing SHIELD without a proper plan is a dangerous game. Hill didn't flinch. It's already dangerous. We should have moved yesterday. Every hour we wait, he's making more of them. You're too sentimental, Pierce countered smoothly. Better to let others handle it. Local law enforcement. FBI. Military. Let them go after him. We watch. We measure. If they succeed, we clean up quietly. If they fail. He gave a faint smile. Then we learn exactly what we're dealing with before risking our own people. You mean before sacrificing someone else's people? Hill's words hung like a blade in the room, daring anyone to challenge what they all already knew. Pierce didn't rise to the bait. Don't be so dramatic. Fury finally spoke, his voice slowly and measured. You're both missing the point. This isn't about tech. Not about numbers. It's about something we don't understand. His eye flicked back to the footage. That man's not building soldiers. He's building something beyond simple armies. One bullet won't stop it. Neither will 10. Coulson tapped his pad, pulling up Kara's latest report. Agent Kara confirms mass abductions. Forced augmentation. Criminals mostly, low profile, expendable. SHIELD standing orders remain observation only. Observation. Hill echoed, arching a brow. We could have dropped a bomb already, but from observation, he seems to possess teleportation tech, Coulson said calmly, though a crease of unease lined his brow. One bomb wouldn't be enough. We need to lure him out, then strike. Hill's gaze stayed steady. That's going to be difficult. He doesn't leave his sanctum. Pierce shrugged. Maybe Stark could lure him out to some conference or gala. Easy target. Fury considered this, leaning back, fingers steepled beneath his chin. His gaze lingered on still frames, servo-skulls drifting through dead corridors, lifeless bodies stripped of humanity beneath sterile light. We won't do that. But we could try something similar, he said at last. First, draw him out. Then use third-party assets. Keeps our hands clean. Keeps SHIELD out of the spotlight. FBI, maybe. Tactical units. PMC for deniability. And if needed. A few agents or soldiers disguised as 10 rings. Pierce was thinking if he should let Fury join him as just guys was more evil than him. He kept smiling. Finally, some common sense. We can definitely create new 10 rings. We could easily fund small units to do the dirtiest work. That would be great, Fury warned. With this plan, we can finally test his limits. See how deep the rabbit hole goes before we decide how many bodies we're willing to throw in after. Hill frowned. And what if Luthar's strength is beyond even what we're guessing? Then we know the scale of the problem. Fury's tone turned cold steel. No matter what forces he's built, it won't be enough. That, I can guarantee. Coulson slid the finalized options onto the central holodisplay, potential third-party deployment. FBI hostage rescue team. U.S. Army Special Forces, Delta. Private military contractors, expendable, no oversight. Pierce's smile widened by degrees. Let someone else be the canary. Smart move. Privately, he considered sending word to Rumlow, ensuring the tech was salvaged and any traces scrubbed if the FBI or military succeeded in removing Luthar. Fury didn't return the smile. His gaze stayed fixed on the looping footage. On silent suffering beneath layers of steel and flesh. On mechanical vultures circling the remnants of humanity. He wondered if Kara realized how little her reports would change the outcome. SHIELD didn't save people. Not anymore. SHIELD managed outcomes. Balanced losses. Above ground, orders moved quietly. Below, the machines kept building. Proceed with third-party testing, Fury ordered at last. Keep Kara and Rumlow in place. No intervention unless directly involved. Civilian and criminal losses, not our concern. Hill didn't argue. Coulson only nod. Pierce leaned back, satisfied. The screens dimmed. The images faded. Silence remained. Fury's final thought remained unspoken beneath layers of classified files. He already knew what he would do when all else failed. Back in the sanctum, where even metal had a purpose, Kara Lynn stared at the blinking message on her secure tablet. Directive update. Wait for further action. Observe and report. Maintain current cover. No intervention permitted. Civilian and criminal losses deemed acceptable. Her hands trembled despite her training. The faces haunted her, the ones trapped in pods, the ones mid-scream beneath mechanical blades. She heard it all through the listening devices. Now more would be added to those numbers. FBI agents. Soldiers. Men walking into this nightmare thinking it was just another black site. They had no idea. None of them did. Her reflection on the screen looked pale. Hollow. On the edge of tears she refused to shed. No rescue was coming. SHIELD didn't save people anymore. SHIELD watched. SHIELD measured. SHIELD calculated costs and paid them in someone else's blood. Kara set the device down, forcing her face into something cold. Something numb. If she broke now, she'd be next on Luthar's table. Her orders were clear. Observe. And maybe help Luthar capture more victims. She wanted to scream. But there was confusion, too. She had reported Rumlow's betrayal, why was there no order about him? Why no response? Unfortunately, she didn't know the reason. Not yet. Chapter 115, TPM Chapter 114 Ironman failed testing. While S.H.I.E.L.D. buried itself beneath plans stacked atop plans, debating methods, and calculating risks, one man had no interest in waiting for permission or consensus. Nick Fury's final orders had already been issued. Third parties would be sent, expendable, disposable. S.H.I.E.L.D. would watch, measure, and adapt accordingly. But elsewhere, a man who cared nothing for protocols was already moving forward. Stark Tower, workshop level. Jarvis, you've been holding out on me. Tony Stark's voice cut through the steady hum of his upgraded workshop. Tools lay scattered across the workbench, while holographic schematics floated in the air above him, casting blue light over grainy reconnaissance footage, servo skulls, containment pods, and crude augmetics bolted into screaming bodies. Stark didn't need S.H.I.E.L.D.'s analysts to tell him this was trouble. He could smell it a mile away. I assure you, sir, my silence was only until confirmation was absolute. Jarvis sounded faintly apologetic, in the way only a highly advanced AI could manage. Yeah, well, it's confirmed now. So let's get to work. He wasn't naive. This wasn't Obadiah Stane's warmed-over battlesuit nonsense. Luthar wasn't playing catch-up with Stark technology. He was building something entirely different, something that should not exist. Flesh and machine intertwined. Augmented slaves driven by principles Tony barely recognized. Which meant new toys were in order. He began rapid prototyping countermeasures, not to fight a man, but to combat entire systems. Pulse disruptors for localized EMP bursts, calibrated to fry neural uplinks without crippling civilian infrastructure. High-frequency plasma rounds engineered to penetrate reinforced alloys. Environmental disruptors, compact ECM suites designed to jam teleportation signatures, assuming Jarvis analysis held true. This wasn't about winning. This was about surviving long enough to fight another day. Estimate on readiness. 71 hours for full deployment. With reduced safety protocols, 32 hours. Safety's overrated. The newest Mark suit took shape beneath mechanical arms, sleeker, heavier on ordnance, and stripped of unnecessary flourishes. Function over form. He wasn't expecting victory. Not yet. But he would measure Luthar the only way Stark Industries knew how, with overwhelming firepower. While Stark built weapons, Luthar built war. In the depths of Luthar's sanctum, production lines roared to life beneath the hymn-like chanting of data servitors. Raw materials transported from a commandeered chemical factory were transformed into something far more dangerous, refined promethium. It overflowed beneath the sacred chemical rites, liquid fire coaxed from polluted veins. Fuel for the future, for flammers, tanks, war engines yet unborn. Machineries of faith and death stood ready. Promethium would power not merely weapons, but belief itself. Chain blades, flammers, graviton projectors, relics of forgotten wars reborn under his hand. Even in this primitive world, he would reconstruct the doctrines of the machine cult. He watched as the first purified drums were sealed within armored transports, servitors securing them with reverent precision. No one would understand what burned beneath these city streets, not S.H.I.E.L.D., not Stark, not anyone. Not until it was far too late. Prepare for the trials, Luthar intoned. The first harvest is prepared. Commence weapons production. Manhattan outskirts, industrial expanse. The sky tore open beneath the glow of repulsor flight. Tony Stark arrived unannounced. He hovered above the ruins of what had once been a manufacturing plant, now overtaken by strange pylons and smog-belching chimneys that hadn't existed a week ago. His new armor gleamed with fresh plating, weapon ports locked and primed. Jarvis. Scan for weaknesses. Tag anything that looks like it shouldn't exist. That will require expanding the definition of shouldn't, sir. Movement below. Not soldiers, constructs. Half-men dragging fuel drums, loading war machines with sluggish obedience. Servitors. Stark felt bile rise despite himself. All right, Frankenstein. Let's see how you handle bleeding-edge tech. He struck first. Pulse disruptors fired, arcs of EMP racing across the compound. Servitors spasmed, some collapsing, others slowing. Stark followed with pinpoint plasma bursts, limbs severed cleanly, machines slagged beneath precision fire. But the sanctum responded. Automated defenses not born of Earth stirred to life, snapping on with cold, mechanical hunger. Stark's countermeasures flared, flares, chaff, deceptive echoes, but the systems adapted faster than expected. Hostile systems attempting to violate protocols on suit integrity. Lock them out. Burn anything that smells ROS. But this wasn't ordinary hacking. It was something older. An invasive code, laced with impossible logic, slipping through firewalls like oil through fingers. Machine analogs crafted not by Earth, but by a world that despised AI. His HUD flashed warnings, system integrity declining, subsystems locking out. Sir, I may not be able to stop the invasion of this code. Its architecture is beyond my comprehension. And then Luthar arrived. Not in person, but through the machines themselves. His voice echoed from speakers that shouldn't have worked, carried on frequencies Stark's armor shouldn't have accepted. Welcome, Stark. I appreciate you testing my new work. No offense, Stark fired back, venting heat through scorched repulsors, but your customer service sucks. Luthar's constructs encircled, not to kill, but to analyze countermeasures adapted. Signals shifted. His suit was being mapped in real time. Jarvis. Hard reset. Blind everything for 60 seconds. We're leaving. Understood. An EMP bloom detonated point blank. Sensors went dark. Repulsors screamed as Tony rocketed skyward, leaving behind slagged ground and fractured constructs. By the time systems came back online, he was already miles away. The Sanctum's defenses returned to idle, as they were not ordered to attack. Back in the depths, Luthar watched the data stream stabilize. An acceptable result. His weaponry is adequate but predictable. His systems, flawed by arrogance. Prepare additional contingencies. Luthar had hoped for a fight, a real one, to properly test his combat-ready servitors. He had even lowered defenses, allowing Stark a false sense of security, letting him believe his technology worked. Unfortunately, Stark had withdrawn. That, Luthar had not expected. After this event, his focus shifted to Plan B. With luck, S.H.I.E.L.D. or the military would soon send forces against him. At least then, he could test his creations. Unknown to him, the reason for Stark's retreat was far simpler. His systems had detected dangerously high radiation levels. If that facility exploded, half the country could be lost. Tony understood that a battle here risked far more than his pride. It risked innocent lives. And so, he had chosen to back off. Author's note. What's with this chapter? I don't know now why this chapter was created, but let's just say it was created. Thinking face. This would be the last chapter, but if you still want to continue, you know the drill, just go to the link below, and you get access to all 43 plus advanced chapters. I'm also working on 158. If you have a suggestion or something to tell me, you can comment like always. Chapter 116, TPM Chapter 115, The Storm Breaks. While S.H.I.E.L.D. buried itself beneath plans layered atop plans, debating methods, and calculating risks, there was another man who wasn't interested in waiting for permission or consensus. The glow of holographic projections painted Tony Stark's face in cold light as he pushed a drive across the table toward Agent Coulson. That's why I called you in person, Tony said, leaning back as he displayed the data he had collected. Coulson raised an eyebrow but said nothing until Jarvis's projections confirmed the readings, unnatural radiation spikes tied to unknown energy signatures. Not nuclear, not gamma. Something else. Something worse. I pulled this from Luthar's base, Stark continued. My sensors can't fully make sense of it. Best guess. It's fuel. For something big. Coulson frowned, flipping through the readouts. We wouldn't be here if you hadn't brought him to America. It wouldn't matter, Tony said, tone sharpening. He's building an engine, maybe. Or a reactor for a ship. Just imagine if he was still in Afghanistan. We wouldn't even know what he was doing until he silently took over the entire country. Coulson's expression didn't change. So should I thank you for bringing this disaster to American soil? Tony gave a humorless smile. No need to thank me, not with your expressionless face. As for Luthar, I already have a plan to take him down. Coulson nodded. Then we'll focus on the radiation. I'll have S.H.I.E.L.D. find the best experts. In the meantime, I suggest you be careful. As Coulson left for S.H.I.E.L.D., preparations on both sides accelerated. In the depths of the sanctum, Luthar moved through the heart of his domain with silent certainty. The vats of promethium burned steadily, purified and refined by ancient rites adapted for this primitive world. Already, the first shipments fed into flammers, engines, and prototype reactors. He did not require whispers from any machine spirit to understand efficiency. Only one problem remained: the population had become his limiting factor. Servitors required flesh. A void ship required operators. A war machine required bodies. If he wished to launch his ship, he would need many people. And he knew a place where they could be gathered with ease: Hell's Kitchen. Not because it was easy to catch people there, but because it had already become his hunting ground. He began preparations for acquisition, prioritizing live capture. Healthy, viable stock only. Minimal damage. The orders echoed through Vox links, carried by agents and constructs alike. Rumlow received his new armament in silence, heavy armor patterned after ancient Forge World designs, crimson trim gleaming, and a modified flamer slung over his shoulder. His grin was faint beneath the rebreather. Finally, he murmured, testing the weight of the weapon, something effective. Beside him, servitors moved without pause, preparing transports and containment for the sweep to come. The latest report had been sent. Kara Lynn had done her duty. Location, Hell's Kitchen. Target, civilian population. Intent, mass capture. Purpose, unknown. Suspected augmentation. Immediate threat level, critical. The reply was as expected. Cold. Distant. Continue observation. No intervention authorized. Proceed with the cover intact. Casualties are acceptable. Kara set the device down with trembling hands. It wasn't fear for herself that gnawed at her. Not yet. It was knowing she'd reported Rumlow's betrayal weeks ago, and no orders had come. No answers. Why? Why ignore that? S.H.I.E.L.D. is only talking about her mission. She didn't understand, which terrified her more than Luthar's machines. But for now, she could do nothing but watch and obey. At S.H.I.E.L.D.'s command center, Maria Hill marked Hell's Kitchen on the holomap with a flick of her stylus. Hell's Kitchen, heavy criminal presence. Perfect place for execution. Perfect for testing. Nick Fury watched the projection with a grim set to his jaw. And the radiation at the Luthar base. Contained. For now. Whatever he's doing underground isn't leaking, yet. Coulson's tone was clinical and detached. Kara's reports line up with Stark's data. He's building fuel. For weapons, vehicles, maybe worse. We hit him in Hell's Kitchen. Hard. Force him to defend. Draw him out. While he's busy, we raid his base. FBI, Army, or PMC? Hill asked. Everything we can use. Delta Force is already briefed on high-risk urban ops. FBI HRT is less undeniable. PMC, try to get some, Coulson answers. Start with PMC first, Fury decided. They're meat shields with guns. If they succeed, the problem is solved. If not, Delta cleans up. Quiet. Alexander Pierce, watching from the periphery, gave a diplomatic smile. Do we need disguises for them? No, Fury said. We already crossed that line. Deploy 2 waves, one in Hell's Kitchen and one at his base workshop, whatever that place is. And if they field completely? Hill asked. Then we prepared to negotiate to cut our losses while starting to plan for war. Fury's voice was ice. Bays opened in the depths of Luthar's sanctum. Convoys rolled out. Servoskulls hovered like carrion birds over streets soon to burn. Supply lines were established. Units armed and active. Readiness confirmed. Rumlow's unit moved ahead, flommers primed, gear humming with lethal intent. I take this district fast, he ordered. No mess. No witnesses. Behind them, containment transports followed, empty cages waiting. Above, Kara watched from the shadows. She already knew what would happen next. In the workshop beneath Stark Tower, Tony's new armor gleamed beneath the overhead lights, sleeker, heavier at the shoulders, with weapon mounts integrated into the frame. New systems waited for field testing, electronic warfare modules, energy disruptors, and hardened defenses against electromagnetic and radiation attacks. Jarvis, he said, cycling through diagnostics, mark this down as Plan B through Z. We're not doing clean fights anymore. Understood, sir. May I ask? Plan A. Tony smirked. Don't die. But while everyone prepared for the storm, there was one person who remained deeply troubled, Lily Ruka Arde. Though loyal to Luthar, she still disliked the idea of capturing so many people. After mustering her courage, she decided to speak. She found Luthar amidst the preparations, surrounded by machinery, schematics, and the hum of weapons being readied. Still, she stepped forward. Master Luthar, she said, her voice quiet but steady. Must it really be this many people? I understand the necessity, but isn't there a better way? Whether her words would sway him remained to be seen. Authors thought, tomorrow, August 28th, is my birthday, but things are not going very well. There are too many issues, from back pain to mobile not working to headphones not working, and I feel like I'm also not able to improve the speed of writing. Chapter 117, TPM Chapter 116, Part 1 The Price of Action, The Storm Breaks. You still don't understand, Lily Ruka. Luthar's words hung in the cold air of the sanctum's heart, devoid of warmth, devoid of humanity. Life holds value only in proportion to its utility. Whether flesh or machine, all things exist to serve a function. Lily Ruka stood motionless, her hands clenched into trembling fists at her sides. She had known this answer would come. It was inevitable with someone like Luthar. Yet hearing it voiced aloud shattered the fragile hope she had dared to nurture. There was no changing him. No convincing him of mercy. No future where kindness factored into his calculations. And yet, to her surprise, Luthar did not simply turn away. However, your concerns are noted. I will not turn all civilians into mindless servitors, provided they demonstrate value in other forms. Lily Ruka blinked. You're sparing them. I will allow them to serve. Labor. Maintenance. Logistics. Some will become caretakers. That is the only compromise I can offer. For Lily, this was enough. A sliver of humanity preserved amid the machinery of conquest. Lily Ruka exhaled slowly, releasing a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. For now, that would have to be enough. Across the city, preparations moved with mechanical precision. S.H.I.E.L.D.'s operational teams finalized their movements in shadowed silence. Across digital screens and encrypted channels, orders were given. No leaks. No hesitation. Hell's Kitchen had been marked for harvesting. PMC convoys rolled in first, black-armored, well-armed, and chosen for their expendability. Behind them, S.H.I.E.L.D.'s own specialized units waited in silence, poised for the simultaneous assault on Luthar's sanctum. Director Fury stood at the center of this operation, his gaze hard beneath the dim lights of the command center, watching as maps updated and feeds flickered to life. This was no longer about containment. This was retaliation. This was escalation. This is it, Maria Hill said beside him, her tone clipped and professional. 2 waves. Hell's Kitchen to draw him out. The sanctum to cripple his infrastructure. Clean. Surgical. Nothing about this is going to stay clean, Fury replied. His eye remained fixed on the red-lit screens where outlines of buildings were already being marked as war zones. We're not playing chess. We're kicking over the whole damn board. Hell's Kitchen, Ground Zero. Rumlow's unit moved first, leading the charge with brutal efficiency. Servitors in crimson-marked armor advanced beside him, their heavy boots pounding against cracked pavement, skull-faced helms glowing with infernal light. Civilian screams echoed through the alleys as containment transports followed in grim procession, their cages yawning open in silent promise. Promethium weapons hissed with suppressed heat, ready to turn resistance into ash. Secure the district, Rumlow ordered, his voice clipped beneath his rebreather. Fast. Clean. He didn't need to say more. The servitors moved without hesitation, metal monstrosities bound by code and cruelty. The PMCs, believing themselves prepared for any threat, opened fire as panic spread through the streets. Bullets tore through the night. For a moment, it seemed a battle might take shape. But they hadn't come prepared for this. Servitors did not fall. Their bodies absorbed gunfire with mechanical indifference. Limbs reforged with steel and sinew shrugged off small arms fire as though it were dust in a storm. Then the flammers roared. Promethium spilled in hungry waves, igniting streets, buildings, and men alike. Fire bloomed through alleys with terrifying speed. Civilians who didn't fall quickly enough were dragged screaming into the containment transports. From above, S.H.I.E.L.D. surveillance drones recorded everything, the brutality, the precision, and the horrifying efficiency of it all. Fury watched the footage feed in with clenched teeth. He had seen war zones, atrocities, human monsters. But this was something else. Burning soldiers alive, this was something the world had abandoned after World War II. Yet these people, these monsters, just pulled out flamethrowers and used them like water guns. This was worse. Reports coming in, Coulson said, not looking away from his monitor. PMC casualties are already exceeding projections. Conflict is also spreading to civilians, the fire cannot be contained. This will result in mass casualties. It's better than getting captured by Luthar, Hill said darkly, recording the screens. In her mind, she was certain, death was more merciful than being captured by Luthar. While Hell's Kitchen burned, S.H.I.E.L.D.'s infiltration teams began their own silent war. Under cover of night, cloaked transports and specialized squads breached the perimeter of Luthar's sanctum. For a heartbeat, it seemed the gamble might succeed. Silent entry. Minimal resistance. Perhaps Luthar had overlooked this vector. Perhaps arrogance had made him sloppy. Then the walls came alive. Automated turrets erupted from hidden panels, spewing plasma bursts and radiation-charged rounds into narrow corridors. Portals shimmered open in the darkness, warping reality itself to disgorge servitors into flanking positions with predatory precision. The halls became a slaughterhouse. Steel tore through flesh. Plasma burned through armor. Screams echoed in confined spaces, swallowed almost instantly by static and silence. One soldier managed to scream into his comms before disappearing beneath a tide of mechanical limbs. His data stream ended in blood and interference. Fury watched the feeds cut out, one by one, replaced with red warnings and mission failure codes. His jaw tightened. We lost the Sanctum team. Coulson's tone remained professional, but there was an edge of tension beneath it. Complete blackout. Hill didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. This wasn't a battle, Fury said quietly, his gaze still fixed on the empty screens. It was bait. And we bit. Hill folded her arms. What's the call? Fury's eye narrowed. We wait. Stark's moving. Let's see if he can hit harder than we did. On the monitors, Hell's Kitchen burned. Above it all, containment transports began retreating, heavy with human cargo. Below, in the Sanctum's depths, Luthar watched the progress unfold. His calculations confirmed success. Civilian stock secured. Military assets collected. Combat effectiveness recorded. Servitor losses are acceptable within parameters. The next phase was ready. To be continued. Author's note, the first time this chapter 116 was written, there was only one part in 1K words, but after reading, I realized it was more like a summary of the events, so I split the chapter and then edited to improve the situation. But I still forget it was supposed to be about servitors versus soldiers. Persevering face. Chapter 118, TPM Chapter 116, Part 2 The Price of Action, The Iron Gambit. Tony Stark stood before the latest iteration of his armor, arms folded, eyes hard beneath the glare of diagnostic screens. This suit wasn't built for elegance. It was built for survival. Heavier shoulders reinforced for extra protection. Weapon ports integrated directly into the frame. Hardened defenses layered against electromagnetic warfare. Every inch of it screamed preparation, not presentation. Jarvis, he said, watching the final checks scroll green across the display, triple-check the shielding protocols. I'm not walking blind into another one of his surprises. Redundancy confirmed, sir. All systems are operating at maximum efficiency. I have also prepared emergency protocols, in case things go poorly. Tony smirked faintly. That's great. Let's just hope I won't need them. If I may, sir, do you have a preferred outcome for this engagement? Yeah. We make it out breathing. He stepped into the armor. Plates hissed shut with finality. The HUD flickered to life. Systems hummed. Synced. Locked. Hope we have better luck than last time, Tony muttered as the suit sealed. A few minutes later, in Hell's Kitchen, repulsors screamed as Tony dropped into the chaos. Below, Rumlow's forces moved with brutal efficiency. Servitors in crimson armor advanced through fire and ruin, corralling civilians into containment units with mechanical precision. Promethium still burned in gutters, painting the night in hungry orange. Weapons turned as one toward the new arrival. Jarvis, Tony said calmly, target acquisition. Prioritize flammers and transports. Targets locked. Firing solutions optimal. Repulsor blasts tore through the night. Missiles streaked toward armored transports. Energy disruptors shattered power cores in bursts of blue lightning. Servitors fell, not many, but enough to open gaps in their formations. Civilians scattered in panic. Rumlow's voice barked orders over corrupted Vox channels, containment at any cost. Tony pressed forward, his suit holding against heat and radiation alike. The shielding held. The new systems worked. For now. But this wasn't like last time. These weren't flawed enemies meant to lure him into overconfidence. Disruptors failed more often than they succeeded. Servitors shifted tactics in real time, closing ranks with frightening precision. Sir, Jarvis warned, multiple hostiles adapting countermeasures. Suggest immediate tactical withdrawal. Not yet. Tony pushed deeper, clearing another transport, buying seconds for civilians to flee. But even victories felt hollow. Every destroyed servitor was replaced by two more. Every transport stopped was answered by another slipping into the shadows with its cargo secured. This wasn't a rescue. It was a stall. And then, the virus struck. Energy pulses rippled through his systems, scrambling diagnostics. HUD flashed red. Warning screamed across every sensor feed. Electromagnetic intrusion detected. Code bypass in progress. Firewalls breached. Jarvis's voice flickered, distorted. Tony gritted his teeth. Lock it down. Cut external comms. Go full manual if you have to. Attempting, countermeasures, engaged. It wasn't enough. A signal cut through the chaos, cold. Precise. You persist in misunderstanding scale. Luthar's voice, without inflection, echoed through Stark's hijacked systems, bleeding into shield frequencies alike. You fight with tools. I build with purpose. Today, you learn the difference between ignorance and divinity. On Shield's monitors, the same words burned in monochrome text. Fury's jaw tightened. Hill said nothing. Coulson simply watched as another feed flickered to black. Kara's heart sank. Her reports. Her warnings. Her efforts. All orchestrated. This wasn't an ambush for Luthar. It was theater. A demonstration. Enough civilians have been secured for the next phase, Luthar's voice continued. Now, I collect your soldiers. Containment units shifted course. SHIELD operatives and PMC forces alike, captured in the chaos, were dragged into the darkness beneath Luthar's domain. Bound. Broken. Tony fought through failing systems, forcing emergency protocols to reboot. Armor stuttered. Repulsors flared weakly, then sparked and died. He dropped like a stone, slamming into ruined pavement with a grunt of pain. The HUD flickered. Warning lights cascaded across the screen. Jarvis. He rasped. Restart, emergency. But the AI didn't answer. Static filled his helmet. Failsafes were overridden. Heavy footsteps approached. Not in haste. Not in pursuit. In certainty. Luthar stepped through the smoke, his crimson robes billowing like a war banner in a storm. The air shimmered faintly around him. His eyes glowed beneath the mask, luminous lenses fixed on Stark with cold calculation. Tony raised a repulsor. It fizzled. No power. No fight. Luthar didn't draw a weapon. He didn't need one. With a single motion, he gripped Iron Man's gauntlet. Metal shrieked as his fingers dug into the composite plating. And then, he tore it off. Clean. No matter how much you polish the shell, Luthar murmured, examining the gauntlet like a failed prototype, it remains fragile beneath my hand. Tony tried to rise. Luthar placed a foot on his leg. The armor groaned under the pressure. Another tug, shoulder plate torn free. Then the forearm. Sparks flew. You improved it, Luthar said, voice neutral, clinical. Better alloys. Smarter circuitry. But it's not enough. Tony gasped as the chest plate ripped open, revealing the arc reactor flickering in protest. Luthar didn't reach for it. Not yet. Just like I dismantled your first armor in the desert, your little AI will not change the outcome. He grasped the helmet. Tony's breath caught. And then, piece by piece, Luthar peeled it away. Not to kill. To prove superiority. Tony lay exposed, pain crawling up his spine, the shattered remnants of his pride scattered around him in smoking fragments. One by one, servitors retrieved the pieces of the Iron Man suit, cataloging, scanning, and extracting data. Tony blacked out to Luthar's final words. No matter how much you improve in the future, the outcome will not change. Elsewhere, SHIELD command fell silent. Fury stood unmoving as monitors flickered between static and crimson warnings. Casualty reports scrolled in cold, clinical text. Hell's Kitchen burned beneath iron footsteps. Civilians lost. Soldiers taken. Hill waited for orders. Coulson waited for orders. Fury gave none. His eye remained fixed on the feed. They hadn't been fighting a man. They had been fighting inevitability. And they had already lost the first battle. Finally, Fury spoke, quietly. Grim. Prepare for negotiation. The first priority is getting Tony back. Back in the sanctum, Kara received her answer. Congratulations, Luthar said, watching as captives were processed. You have contributed more than any other to this operation. Your messages drew SHIELD to me. Provided soldiers. Data. Resources. He gestured toward the prisoners being dragged past, soon to be reborn in circuits and steel. Without you, my harvest would have been incomplete. Kara swallowed her anger. She'd never imagined her messages had been filtered, so Luthar could collect soldiers. What now? What are you going to do with me? I will reward you. Ensure your obedience. So you do not anger me in the future, by accident. He turned away. The matter, to him, was settled. Lily Ruka watched from the shadows. Relief warred with exhaustion. At least the civilians were spared the servitor's fate, a fate worse than death. As for the fate of the soldiers, she didn't care. Elsewhere, unseen, another observer watched. Not to save Luthar's victims. But to claim Luthar himself. The next move belonged to others. End of Part 2. Author's note. I want to give a shout out to Nobody, actually, this is the name, not a joke, so I really want to thank Nobody. Another person I want to thank is left_nut_of_Madara, yes, you read that correctly. Well, their names are quite unique, but I am really happy people like them came out and supported me, especially since this month was quite bad. Loudly crying face. Or. Chapter 119, TPM Chapter 117, Calibration. Tony Stark's world returned not with light, but pain, raw, electric pulses across every nerve. He tried to move, only to find himself locked in place, limbs heavy and restrained. Metal, definitely. The air around him was cold and sterile, carrying the faint scent of ozone and oil. "Welcome back," a voice intoned, flat and unhurried. Tony's eyes fluttered open. Blinding light overhead forced a squint, but he managed to focus on the figure standing before him, tall, robed in crimson and steel, with wires stretched from banks of ancient cogitators into his own temple. The pain was dull now, distant, numbed by something injected or simply overridden. "Luthar," Tony rasped. "You are remarkably difficult to incapacitate," the tech priest replied without looking up. His attention was focused on a glowing holographic projection to Tony's side, a stream of data in no known language. "It's really bad. I did not find anything after scanning your neural architecture, which makes you so special." Tony coughed. "Next time, just ask for a sit-down interview." Luthar turned toward him. His eyes, mechanical and unblinking, seemed to pierce deeper than mere biology. "Your humor will not shield you from the implications of your failure. I call it charm." Tony tried to smile, but the movement tugged at the wires. "What's this? Brain scan? Thought decoder? Are you trying to plagiarize my genius?" "No," Luthar said simply. "I am cataloging it and checking if I can copy your mind and put it inside a computer, which would do research day and night for me." Tony tensed. "I would still suggest you just use AI because you cannot copy my greatness. If I can't copy your greatness, then you would be quite useless for me. Which means I can only turn you into a piece of some door lock." The words were cold. Not cruel, cruelty required emotion. Luthar's tone held none. He might as well have been reading a temperature gauge. Tony's arm strained against the restraints again. "I thought you were going to turn me into one of your mechanical zombies. Rip out my spine, plug in a USB, call it a day." "You are not suitable for servitor conversion," Luthar replied. "Like I said, the best thing I can do is to turn you into a door lock to avoid any situation where you can make a comeback." "Wow, didn't think you would be afraid of me," Tony said. Luthar did not respond to the quip. Instead, he reached forward and calmly adjusted a dial. The pain flared again, not physical, but mental, like static across thought itself. "I am not afraid, I am just in trouble that even if I transform you into a servitor, you might still interfere with me," he said. Tony gritted his teeth. "Come on, it's not like I have a secret nuke or a hidden protocol for wiping you out. I already know that." Luthar's eyes didn't blink. "You are not an apex intellect, but your improvisation and adaptive behaviors are statistically anomalous. By letting you live, I might be able to learn something. So I'm just a lab rat to you." "Yes." Far above the sanctum, in the shield's command relay, Nick Fury watched silent screens glow red with failure codes. The operation was lost. Stark's signal had gone dark. The sanctum infiltration team, obliterated. It had been a full hour of silence. At the same time, far from the sanctified horrors of the sanctum, Hell's Kitchen remained under lock and fire. In a half-collapsed tenement tower converted into a holding point, Rumlow paced with restless frustration. The servitors stood motionless, encircling the perimeter, their glowing optics casting long shadows. He keyed his communicator, sending a direct encrypted pulse. "2, Luthar. Too many to move. We do not have instructions to house this many." The reply came not in words, but in a stream of machine cant. Rumlow's modified augmetics translated it aloud in his ear. "Initiate localized containment. Screening will be conducted on site. Those deemed functionally sufficient will be transported. Others discarded." Rumlow scowled but said nothing. He looked out over the makeshift pens of terrified civilians and soldiers alike. The message was clear: useful labor would be spared. The rest were abandoned or worse. He closed the channel. Inside the sanctum, the lights flickered. Somewhere in the machine womb of that place, a voice whispered, not a human one, but a chorus of data and iron. Luthar's mind focused on a dozen tasks at once. Tony was still talking. "I'm just saying," the billionaire muttered through clenched teeth, "if you're going to abduct a genius, at least have the decency to offer room service. You know, a cot, maybe a latte. Your comfort is irrelevant. Come on, you don't want your prized research asset dying of boredom. You will not die until I permit it." Tony snorted. "That's comforting." Luthar turned again toward his console. "I have dissected hundreds of minds. If you continue to irritate me, I might disassemble yours. And after that, you'll try to copy me. I will replicate your conscience and improve it. Strip out weakness. Remove emotion. Then split them into multiple SAB programs." Tony laughed bitterly. "Yeah, good luck with that. Emotion is half the reason I built the damn suit in the first place." Luthar's gaze turned back to him, and for the first time, there was a pause. Something like contemplation. "Emotion is irrelevant," he said, but slower now. Yet its patterns yield unpredictable utility. We people wage war over ideals. Loyalty. Pain. Love. Illogical. Inefficient. But powerful. Tony blinked. Wait, did you just admit we're not entirely useless? No. I admitted the emotion is a powerful force. That is not the same. Yeah, well, Stark exhaled, I'll take the compliment anyway. Back at Stark Tower, Pepper Potts clutched her tablet so tightly her knuckles turned white. Jarvis had just given her the confirmation. Tony had been taken. Where, she demanded. Where is he? I do not have precise coordinates, Miss Potts, Jarvis replied, its voice oddly subdued. However, he should be in Luthor's primary base. She was already moving, grabbing her phone and her purse. Her voice trembled. Call Rhodes. Now. Back at S.H.I.E.L.D., Fury stood before a digital map, now marked with flashing icons. He'd had enough. This doesn't end with more drones and delays, he growled. This ends face to face. Hill raised an eyebrow. You're visiting him. Alone. He's not going to talk to a proxy. We've already thrown everything else at him. It's time I spoke to the monster myself. He turned and walked toward the elevator. Below, in the cold sanctum of steel and silence, Tony's voice weakened. You're going to lose, you know. Luthar looked up. Explain. You think this world runs on order. Equations. Calculations. But it doesn't. It runs on chaos. Stubbornness. People care about things you don't understand. Luthar stepped forward, gaze unreadable. You cared. You still feel. Tony gave a crooked grin. Yeah. But I'm not the only one. The wires pulsed again. Data flowed. Stark's mind laid bare. Luthar watched and catalogued it all, every thought, every defiance, every flicker of resistance. Because even if the world burned around them, he wants to know what makes a genius. Or. Chapter 120, TPM Chapter 118, Another Compromise. Rain fell in sheets over the Manhattan skyline, drowning sirens and smoke under a gray shroud of silence. The storm had come and gone, but its echoes lingered, in ruined buildings, in broken bodies, and in the minds of those trying to make sense of what remained. S.H.I.E.L.D.'s convoy rolled through the streets with no attempt at subtlety. Black SUVs, unmarked but unmistakable, moved through the eerily quiet district, headlights flashing over boarded storefronts and broken lamp posts. Soldiers lined rooftops, not aiming down at Fury's escort, but watching. Waiting. The front doors of Luthor's sanctum swung open before Fury even stepped out. He was expected. Nick Fury emerged from the vehicle, his long coat billowing in the wind. The silence around him wasn't merely tense. It was oppressive. This wasn't a territory under occupation, it was a domain. A kingdom carved from the bones of a city, ruled by a man who bent machines and flesh alike to his will. Fury approached the stairs, each footstep echoing like a hammer against stone. He paused only once, as a mechanical servitor clanked past him, dragging a limp, dazed man toward the alley. The man wasn't dead. Not yet. But his eyes were hollow. Then the doors shut behind Fury. Inside, Luthar was waiting. He stood at the center of the hall, robes dark and glistening with bloodstains, though none of it was his. The floor around him was a mixture of steel and stone, etched with circuitry and stained with surgical waste. Flickering tubes lined the walls, each containing things that should not have existed, mutated organs, spines, and ocular implants still twitching. Director Fury, Luthar intoned, voice colder than steel. Your timing is interesting. You've caused quite a mess, Fury said, his voice calm but firm. And you have something that belongs to me. Correction. Had. Most of what I acquired is already repurposed or discarded. But let me guess, you're here for Stark. It's not just about Stark, I'm here to make a deal. You know that. A pause. Luthar didn't blink. He didn't need to. Behind them, a screen lit up with biometrics, Stark's brainwaves, distorted and erratic. Needles of activity spiked where there should have been rest. The screen zoomed into areas of the frontal cortex, annotated with machine code overlays in a language only Luthar fully understood. Well, I have finished my experiments on his brains, Luthar said. His insights are primitive but interesting. The only disappointment is I didn't find what I was looking for. Even so, I don't see the reason to release him. Fury's jaw tightened. You're going to give him back. Him and the civilians your men rounded up. Luthar turned slowly. And in return. Fury pulled out a case. Metal. S.H.I.E.L.D. issued. He opened it just enough for the glow inside to spill out, not light, but data. A hard-coded key with encryption so deep it burned through processor time like fire through oil. Top-level S.H.I.E.L.D. data, Fury said. Medical black files. Experimental archives. Information about Project Pegasus and Project Rebirth. Half of it predates my command. For the first time, Luthar paused. You give me Stark and the civilians. You keep Hell's Kitchen, for now. But I need those civilians back. Luthar tilted his head, the lights on his mechadendrites flaring. Agreed, he said after a moment. But I keep the ones already transformed, and I choose 3 more from the civilians, as I found they would be quite useful. Fury's face tightened, but he nodded. After all, the result was still better, as at least for now all the citizens would be released. Luthar extended a hand. One mechadendrite moved forward, fused with Fury's device. A short burst of light passed between them. The deal was made. I'll prepare Stark's release, Luthar said flatly. Fury turned without another word. As the final sparks of data transfer faded between the mechadendrite and the device, Luthar turned away from the center of the sanctum. Retrieve Stark, he commanded. 2 servitors moved without question, their limbs jerking with unnatural precision. Down through the corridors they went, into the heart of the sanctum, where power hummed from every wall, and the air reeked of ozone and sterilization chemicals. Tony Stark, suspended by clamps, lifted his head as the door hissed open. Well, he croaked, a smirk half formed on his bruised face. Did the cyborg finally get bored of poking wires into my brain? Luthar's voice crackled through a speaker embedded in the wall. Your usefulness has concluded, and let me tell you, yours is less useful than something I can craft in a few minutes. Before Tony could reply, the sedative was put in his veins and maybe a few other things that he would never find. Then the servitors released the clamps. He dropped to the floor in a heap, coughing. Jarvis, he rasped. Note to self. Never get caught by a space priest with daddy issues. The servitors hoisted him upright like cargo. They didn't answer. They weren't meant to. Machines did not humor sarcasm. Back at the surface, Fury stood by his car, flanked by 2 agents. He didn't speak as the servitors deposited Stark in front of him, unconscious again, whether from pain, exhaustion, or the last injection, no one could tell. Fury knelt down. His single eye swept over Stark's remains of the arc reactor casing fused to his chest. We'll get you patched up, he muttered. Then he turned back toward the sanctum, staring once more at the sealed door. Luthar watched him through a high-mounted lens, a mechanical eye embedded in the stone. He made no move to follow. The deal was over. The moment Fury's convoy left the place, Luthar started to move. Upload the civilian records, he ordered. A pair of servoskulls hovered closer, projecting hololithic screens before him. Each one displayed faces, data, biometric readouts, age, medical history, and preliminary testing results from the initial scans. He filtered through them with mechanical speed, eyes darting like code readers as he analyzed each profile. Useless. Weak. Incompatible. Discard. Images vanished one by one. Then he stopped. 3 faces remained. Subject A, female. Early 20s. Viable immune system. High mitochondrial regeneration rate. No known mutations. Blood showed compatibility with genetic grafts. Subject B, young girl still a teenager. Low body mass but high neuroplasticity. Brainwave patterns suggested resilience to psychological strain. Early indicators of suppressed telepathic sensitivity. Subject C, also a girl ex-medical student. High anatomical knowledge. Potential surgical assistant or test administrator. Acceptable, Luthar said. He sent the command. Quarantine these 3. Begin preconditioning. Prepare augmentation suites 3, 6, and 11. The servitors obeyed. Behind Luthar, another machine hummed to life, a massive biotank surrounded by swirling vials of preserved DNA strands and experimental retroviruses. He stepped toward it, raising the data shard Fury had given him. His eyes gleamed as the interface accepted the encrypted files. Lines of shield science flowed across his interface, Project Rebirth formulas, early-stage replicants from the Super Soldier formula, failed mutant suppression enzymes, and gene-editing protocols years ahead of global medicine. The most important of them was Project Pegasus, where they developed light-speed engine development based on the Tesseract, very important research. For him, studying this data, he might be able to discover new technologies, which would give system points. Luthar spoke aloud, his voice merging with the machines. Now begins the construction. He inserted the file into the master console. Machinery stirred. DNA strands were isolated, cross-stitched, and fused with his own chemical templates. One of the screens showed a flashing title in digital red. Serum Sequence 001, Alpha Human Augmentation Initiative. Luthar stood motionless as the system ran simulations. His breathing slowed to a mechanical rhythm. In this world of chaos and uncertainty, one thing remained clear. Chapter 121, TPM Chapter 119, Ascension. The hum of the biotank reverberated through the chamber like a cold heartbeat, each pulse mirrored in the dull throb behind Luthar's cybernetic eye. Above ground, the shield convoy had long since disappeared into the distance, its diplomatic exchange completed, its consequences just beginning. The corridors of the sanctum had quieted once more, silence ruling where bargaining and tension had only recently lingered. In his private sanctum, Luthar stood before a cascade of schematics suspended in the air, light and data forming an intricate weave of machinery and theory. The centerpiece of it all, a full reactor overhaul. A rejection of outdated warp dependence in favor of raw, unfiltered power. The current subspace generator, once a prized artifact of mechanicum ingenuity, does not work without subspace. It relied on an unstable warp, it's time for a change. The replacement plan spanned across 2 chambers, twice the volume of the original hyperflux reactor. A plasma reactor would serve as the energy source for the new lightspeed engine. The plasma reactor would serve as the primary node, drawing continuous power from fusion cells, with full magnetic containment and rotating field polarizers. Stabilization came through the hyperflux reactor, mounted in tandem. Its role is to provide extra energy and act as a backup in case of unexpected events. He traced the luminous path of the energy cycle with a mechanical finger. Every line was precise. Every junction accounted for. This was no patchwork design, it was the birth of a system worthy of forging war, not merely surviving it. Activated the system research mode as he asked, display integration model, plasma hyperflux conversion. The schematics shifted. Animated sequences showed fusion initiation, energy dispersal, magnetic shaping, and synchronized flux correction. Heat signatures projected across containment maps. Failsafes blinked into place. After looking at them, he started to look at the second thing, which was his system notifications. / system notice, arc reactor, core understanding complete. Plus 90,000 tech points, structural comprehension, Gen 1 Stark reactor. Plus 13,000 tech points, dynamic calibration modeling. Plus 800 tech points, high efficiency containment protocols. Total tech points, 996, 500. He blinked. The arc reactor, though primitive by his standards, had nonetheless offered insights. Miniaturization. Clean loop design. Self-regulating containment. Stark's first-generation reactor was more than just a symbol of defiance, it was the seed of functional innovation. Not enough to reach his next technological milestone. But close. It was time he started acquiring resources, like starting the scan of Mars for resources. Also, he needed to check the Jupiter moons. Luthar murmured as he tapped into the resource database. All rich with the materials, once I get them, I will not have to worry about resources. For now, the blueprint remained theoretical, the harvesting plan deferred until the foundation was laid. Behind the data display, construction drones had already begun sealing off the lower floor. The subspace generator would be put away safely. And then, there was the matter of the serum. He descended alone into the secured laboratory. The secondary room was dark and quiet. The chamber reeked of sterilization chemicals and surgical discipline. Holographic overlays hovered in the air, detailing genome sequences, protein bindings, and viral sheaths. 3 subjects remained. The rest, over 70 civilians, had already been released per his agreement with Fury. They had served their diplomatic function. Their utility had ended. But these 3. His gaze moved to the projected files, facial images floating alongside detailed biometrics. Subject 01, Marissa Lane, age 23. Civilian systems engineer, formerly employed at a Los Angeles-based tech firm. Built multiple autonomous drones pre-crisis. Notable neuroresilience and a refined cortical map suited for neural interface experiments. Tagged, augmentation compatible. Subject 02, Haruka Saito, age 25. Biomedical researcher, formerly part of a private Japanese medical NGO. Field experience during natural disaster relief efforts. Advanced knowledge of viral behavior and enzyme reactions. Tagged, serum synthesis compatibility. Subject 03, Anya El Masri, age 22. Emergency medical technician. No formal education beyond paramedic training, but multiple recorded events of heightened reflexes and rapid muscle regeneration following stress-induced injury. Tagged, anomalous physiology. None were affiliated with S.H.I.E.L.D. That made them clean. Controllable. Luthar looked past the human faces. He saw systems. Variables. Building blocks. Not in contempt, but in purpose. These were no longer test subjects, they would be believers of the machine god. The primary synthesis unit sat at the center of the lab, pulsing with low energy. Tubes of pale blue fluid fed into rotating cylinders. Injectors calibrated automatically, measuring nanoliters at a time. The machine, constructed from both Mechanicum design and the formula given by S.H.I.E.L.D. only a working model of the serum derived from Project Rebirth and older gene splicing logs. The files Fury had handed over were incomplete. Even so, the knowledge was enough for him to build a brand, News Upper Soldier Serum, which could make these 3 girls a little bit more resilient, as he would not want them to one day die from overwork. Drawing from rejected Hydra serum variants, recovered Erskine notes, and black market Wakandan gene isolation methods, he rebuilt the serum strand by strand, rewriting its biological identity. / System notice, unauthorized biological modifications detected. No tech points awarded. Incomplete technology. He watched as the final sequences merged into a stable template. Injections would be phased, 3 rounds per subject. Side effects unknown. Success is not guaranteed. He accepted the risk. Back at the core command hub, screens blinked to life. 1 listed reactor progress. Hyperflux reactor completed, 18%. Forge power diverted, 3 sectors sealed. Orbital mining drone construction 20%. Another displayed serum preparation timelines. Prototype vial number 1, calibrated. Subjects moved to cryostasis pending first trial. Failure margin, 61.7%. Acceptable, ****. The rest of the displays monitored ship systems, surveillance feeds, and encrypted messages from the surface. One stood out, Rumlow's report. / Rumlow, outer perimeter stabilized. All non-military civilians processed and released. Soldier containment secure. Luthar nodded once. / Luthar, continue personnel scanning. Prepare a new batch of candidates from combat-grade soldiers. Prioritize spine structure, cortical adaptability, and resistance. He closed the display. Hours passed. Below him, reactors hummed as automated cranes positioned new segments of the reinforced alloy casings. Plasma vents lined up with precision. The twin-core reactor would change everything, from propulsion to the speed of a copper ship would not have a void shield, so he would have to think about something else. Elsewhere, the cryochamber sealed shut around 3 girls who, only days ago, were ordinary. And now, they were part of the cult of Machine God. As for their resistant and non-cooperative behavior, it could be dealt with slowly without doing too much brainwashing, as it would affect their thinking. Let the world chase heroes, he murmured. And I will chase the miracle. He turned, steps echoing down the hall of steel. In the darkness of his lab, Luthar's vision took root. Author's note, I just tried to check for any grammar mistake and fixed the result was I got more mistakes so I'm stopping for now as I do not want to destroy the chapter end. Or. Chapter 122, TPM Chapter 120, Foundry of Flesh and Steel. The forge lab was quiet, the only sound was formed. Faint pulses of energy moved through embedded conduits, letting everyone know this wasn't a normal place. A single reinforced observatory lens remained closed, its protective shutter dimming the last traces of daylight above. In the heart of it, Luthar stood before the forge. Rad-robed and solemn, he watched as molten metal flowed through containment grooves, funneled into insectal molds. Sparks flared, hissed, and died. 2 crude scarabs emerged from the birthing crucible, smoke still trailing from their cooling carapaces. They were knockoffs, imitations of Necron archaeotech, but sufficient for his designs. They lacked the ornate inlay, the grace, and the living metal shimmer. Yet they moved. They obeyed. That was enough. Activate scarab subroutines, Luthar commanded, placing a gloved hand over the interface terminal. With a soft chime, cables descended from the ceiling, connecting to recessed ports on the scarabs' backs. The machines twitched, first with stutters, then with fluid, insectoid motion. Their legs clicked against the grated floor as diagnostic lights flashed across their photoreceptors. These would not be war constructs. They were not born for battle. Their function was far more sacred, to assist in transformation. Across the chamber, the first test subjects had already been prepared. A row of surgical slabs lined the augmentation hall, each fitted with magnetic restraints and cranial interface ports. Upon them, sedated soldiers lay bare and vulnerable. Their uniforms had been incinerated. Their bodies were shaved and marked for surgery. Luthar moved among them with the air of a high priest, more surgeon than general. He paused at each slab, inspecting musculature, bone density, and vital compatibility. Each man had once served Hydra, S.H.I.E.L.D., or local militaries. None had volunteered. Commence augmentation, he intoned. The scarabs reacted instantly. Thin mechanical tendrils extended with surgical tools attached, scalpels, injectors, laser cutters, and bone drills. The air filled with the scent of antiseptic mist and cauterized flesh. The first man shuddered as his eyes were removed, replaced with adaptive ocular lenses capable of infrared vision and kinetic tracking. His limbs were cut open, and titanium braces were welded into place along the bones. His vocal cords were neutralized, rendering him permanently mute. Muscles were laced with synth fiber mesh, strengthening response time by measurable degrees. What emerged after the first subject was no longer human in the conventional sense. Luthar observed impassively as the scarabs completed the final sealing process, grafting an obedience node to the base of the man's spine. He was Skitarii now, half dead, wholly obedient, a silent guardian awaiting command. Luthar stepped back and activated the containment protocol. The slabs rotated downward, inserting the newly forged into nutrient stasis pods. Pneumatic seals hissed shut. Monitoring lights turned green. Inside the dark suspension fluid, the cyborgs floated, still, silent, waiting for purpose. The sound of armored boots echoed from the corridor. Luthar did not need to turn to recognize them. Efficient, Rumlow said, stepping into the chamber. His expression was unreadable, but a flicker of unease danced behind his eyes. But it doesn't look good. You will be next, Luthar replied flatly. Rumlow straightened. Next for what? For new heart that does not fail. Eyes that cannot be deceived. It's time for you to go beyond natural flesh. I think my current enhancement is enough, Rumlow began, but his protest died as mechanical arms descended from the ceiling. Clamps seized him with impossible speed and held him aloft. You are valuable. I am ensuring you remain so, Luthar said. Rumlow's scream was muffled by the autosuppressor clamped over his jaw. Sedatives dulled the edges of his mind but could not shield him from the agony of being remade. One of his eyes was torn from the socket, replaced with a multi-spectrum augmetic module. His rib cage cracked open to make way for a synthetic heart, its internal pump thudding out of sync until neural calibration kicked in. Bones were flayed open and reinforced with black alloy splints, and his spinal cord was spliced to accept data jacks and biofeedback regulators. Electrodes jabbed into his nervous system, overloading synapses with machine logic. It took hours. When the machines finally retracted and the restraints loosened, Rumlow sagged forward, convulsing, drenched in sweat, a thread of blood trailing from his nose and ears. He didn't speak. He couldn't. His mouth hung open, slack and disoriented. Luthar stepped into view, casting a long shadow over the men. Congratulations on surviving. Rumlow's one remaining organic eye fluttered open, bloodshot and wild. The augmetic eye pulsed red, scanning the chamber in rapid succession, unable to focus. Before he could master a voice to speak, Rumlow collapsed, groaning like a wounded animal. His body no longer answered as it once did. Well, I guess I should have used more anesthesia next time, Luthar said. After an hour in another chamber, 3 girls sat at separate desks, surrounded by guards. The atmosphere was sterile, not punitive, designed for function. Each girl had a datapad in front of her, displaying rotating schematics, rudimentary bionics, simplified chemical models, and stripped-down xenotech codices, repackaged into digestible modules. You are no longer civilians, Luthar said, addressing them from the doorway. His voice echoed flatly through the room. You are assets. One of the girls swallowed hard. Her hands trembled over the pad, but she said nothing. At his side stood Lily, impassive. She tapped her own device. Initial aptitude scans are complete. The 2 older ones show potential for bionic assistance roles. The youngest leans toward chemical comprehension. Good, Luthar replied. Refine their instruction accordingly. Segment their modules and isolate their sleeping cycles to reduce behavioral overlap. He walked slowly between the desks. His presence was not comforting, only oppressive. To him, they were clay. Unformed. But not without potential. They could be technicians, operators, asset managers, anything but liabilities. Near the rear of the chamber stood Kara Lynn, arms folded. Her body armor looked ill-fitting now, more prison than protection. Her eyes darted toward the exit, then back to the girls. You dream of escape, Luthar said without turning. Kara flinched. You may run, he continued. But the spinal implant with a few microbombs I installed inside you cannot be removed without killing you. Why are you keeping me here? She asked, voice tense. Because you are still useful. Lily glanced at her with something close to pity. Come on, it's not that bad, at least it's better to work for Luthar than stupid S.H.I.E.L.D. That evening, Luthar stood alone once more in his command alcove, a raised dais surrounded by hololithic displays. The forge beyond was quiet. The scarabs were docked in maintenance alcoves, their bodies still wet with blood and lubricant. He activated the deep recon protocol. From concealed launch tubes buried in the upper corridors, dozens of microdrones launched silently into the night. Each was no larger than a sparrow, coated in stealth polymers, and guided by predictive algorithms. Their orders were simple: infiltrate and acquire any data on PIM particle technology. One by one, telemetry feeds lit up across the console. Trajectories tracked toward science labs, R&D vaults, forgotten S.H.I.E.L.D. subnodes, and even Stark Industries satellite nodes. The drones whispered through wind and shadow, unnoticed. Luthar's eyes glimmered. If successful, he would gain access to the key to matter manipulation. With PIM particles, machinery could be shrunk and reactors could be compressed. Servitors stored within coins. A forge could fit inside a lunchbox. He turned and moved toward the serum chamber. Suspended within a cryovault was a plasteel cylinder filled with amber fluid. The next iteration of the serum, no longer a mimic of Erskine's design, but a synthetic, gene-reshaped formula drawn from classified SHIELD trials. He opened the cryolock. A test subject was wheeled forward, a restrained SHIELD commando, half-conscious from neural dampeners. Without ceremony, Luthar injected the serum into the man's neck. He waited. Spasms started within seconds. The subject writhed against the restraints, convulsing violently. Muscle density surged, neural pathways lit up, and bones creaked under strain. But then, stabilization. Vital signs leveled. Brain activity returned to optimal levels. Reflex scans showed marked improvement. Bone density up by 17%. Neural integration is stable at 93%. It was working, partially. The man would likely die within 72 hours from systemic degeneration, but data would be logged. That was enough. Luthar tapped a control rune. Schedule incineration for the test body at 0200 hours. Tag data as Phase 2 viability. Moments later, Lily entered the chamber with 2 datapads. Her eyes were tired but precise. The second girl has passed the autopsy sequence. The eldest shows mild resistance. The third hesitates. Accelerate her immersion. Begin visual indoctrination, surgery footage, detachment drills, and neurosystem collapse simulations. She's still young, Lily whispered. You are younger than them, Luthar replied. His voice grew colder. If they can't adapt, they will serve in another role, perhaps as a cute maid, who can be broken and disposable. Lily said nothing. Another drone pinged on the console. Target acquired, PIM data vault, subnode Q17, dormant. Download in progress, ***. Luthar smiled faintly. Progress. He turned toward the forge once more, diagrams for a new drone model appearing across his console. Smaller. Smarter. Not just scouts, harvesters. He activated the intercom. Kara's voice crackled through. What now? Bring the girls, he said. We begin conditioning. A few minutes later, the girls were escorted in, led by Lily, flanked by silent servitors. Their faces were pale. Their steps are reluctant. They stopped at a designated white line on the floor, eyes wide as they looked at the Skitarii pods behind Luthar, at the monsters they would one day help construct. You have been chosen, Luthar said. Not for your pasts, but for what you can become. You will serve the machine god. He held out 3 slim injectors. Memory catalysts. They will accelerate your learning, at a cost. Hallucinations. Amnesia. Identity degradation. Acceptable losses. He handed them to Lily. For a long moment, Lily hesitated. Then, with slow precision, she turned and injected each girl in turn. One by one, they collapsed. Servitors moved forward, lifting them gently and carrying them toward the indoctrination chambers. Their minds would now absorb programming not through logic but through synthetic dreaming, neural flooding, and simulated trauma. Lily stood silently afterward, holding the spent injectors. Was there no other way, she asked. It feels like brainwashing. Luthar did not answer. His gaze was fixed on the console, where blueprints for his next advancement blinked into focus. They were ready. And the forge was never silent. Author's long note for a long chapter: when writing about the tech priest, I am writing too much about creation and discovery for the character. It's okay, but for the novel, it's quite bad. In the next chapters, I am going to switch to Hulk then Thor and try to keep the creation to a minimum. You know, I just purchased new headphones so I can get better voice typing, but even those stop working this I preparing to buy a new phone as this one screen have lots of ghost typing. Basically machine spirits are quite unhappy with me as I have not written about them. The last thing I want to know: every time I upload on Sunday I get around 5 subscriber, but last Sunday I only got 1. Is there any special reason, or do you think I am going in the bad direction? If anyone wants to know what paid members are getting, they at least have 45 chapters ahead, as chapter 165 was just uploaded. Or Chapter 123, TPM Chapter 121, Compression Protocols. The Forge Lab was quiet, the only sound was the faint pulse of energy moving through embedded conduits, indicating this was Northwest Ordinary Place. A single reinforced observatory lens remained closed, its protective shutter dimming the last traces of daylight above. In the heart of the lab, Luthar stood alone before a hololithic array. The floating lattice of light displayed the decrypted results from the thousands of drones dispatched in the previous cycle. These mechanical scouts had infiltrated industrial sites, intercepted surveillance feeds, and scanned for molecular residue, all aimed at one elusive quarry, the secret of PIM particle manipulation. Now, the raw mathematics shimmered before him: trajectories, compression patterns, quantum field inversions, mass anchoring signatures. It was all there, reduced to symbols and models. They do not shrink matter, he murmured to himself. They dislocate it. They rewrite the relationship between space and content, not substance and volume. Lily, stationed at the adjacent synthesis terminal, looked up from her own array. 2 grams of usable PIM particulate extracted. Stabilized. The containment sphere holds. Awaiting test parameters. Luthar nodded. Initiate direct application trial. No automation. I will oversee the compression personally. The chamber shifted. From above, stabilization rings descended, encircling a plain cube of adamantine resting atop a plinth. 1 meter in each direction, uninspired, dull, but unyielding. Compression target, 0.2% of original spatial volume, Luthar ordered. Initiate sequence. The rings lit with controlled pulses of violet and indigo. Within seconds, the air inside shimmered with warped physics. The cube trembled, not from heat or kinetic force, but from the strain of dimensional warping. Then, with a deep click that reverberated through the floor, it collapsed inward. When the light dimmed, the cube remained, now reduced to the size of a thumb joint. Dimensional retention stable, Lily confirmed. Mass preserved. Compression field integrity is at 100%. No radiation leakage. Luthar stepped forward and lifted the miniature object. Despite its size, the weight was unchanged, wrong, dense, like lifting compressed gravity. He said nothing. Instead, he turned and issued commands. Assign Scarab 14 to reactor casing miniaturization. Assign Scarab 9 to begin structural reduction on the Neuroforge interfaces. Begin spatial optimization cycles across all machinery, target reduction, 30% before the next cycle ends. Okay, Lily replied. All at once, the forge came to life. Dozens of scarabs emerged from recessed alcoves, their segmented limbs deploying welders, cutters, and precision laser arms. They scuttled across gantries and walls with perfect unity, descending upon massive machines to reshape them. Welding sparks flared, coolant hissed from pressure valves, and servo cranes swung to store the shrunk devices in newly designated storage vaults. Walls shifted as panels rearranged. What once required industrial-scale volume was now becoming compact, mobile, and refined. And with each successful compression, Luthar's system chimed softly. Plus 1 K points, spatial field understanding, 84%. Plus 10 K points, dimensional folding principles, 79%. Knowledge, not replication, was rewarded. He did not merely copy, he understood. This was the system's demand, and he fulfilled it with unwavering focus. Until the rhythm of the forge was interrupted. Incoming transmission. Priority, red. Source, shield monitor grid, node gamma. Classification, urgent, non-intercepted. Keywords, gamma spike / Harlem / subject, banner. Luthar's gaze shifted without surprise. A new hololith unfurled to his right, displaying real-time surveillance feeds. The streets of Harlem were in chaos, vehicles overturned, structures demolished. Civilians screamed and scattered across the cracked asphalt. At the center of it all stood a beast, a behemoth of green fury and unrestrained violence. That's the Hulk, he thought. Luthar studied the footage without emotion. The gamma readings were astronomical. The creature exhibited impossible regeneration rates, and strikes from it crushed military-grade armor, triggering seismic pulses with every impact. Lily stepped forward. Is that a monster? No, he answered. It's the Hulk. She looked uneasy. Should we intervene? No, Luthar replied coldly, but we can do something better. He issued the next order with unflinching clarity: wake the Scitarii, it's a good chance to observe their compact capabilities. Within moments, lights flickered in the adjacent vaults. 5 Scitarii units powered online. Their armored forms, thin and sharp, encased in ceramic, rose from rest pods with mechanical precision. Data feeds streamed into their visual implants, programming their neural matrices with urban reconnaissance behavior, gamma heat signature tracking, and non-engagement parameters. In a separate chamber, Rumlow was already awake. The augmentation work was complete, one of his eyes was now mechanical, and his bloodstream could be flooded with synthetic adrenal cocktails on command. Rumlow, Luthar transmitted across Vox. You will lead the recon mission. Observe. Record. No combat unless necessary. Avoid line of sight with the Hulk. Understood, came the reply. Cold, steady. Prep time. It would take 21 minutes to reach Harlem if we took the air route. I'm authorizing use of skimmers. The skimmers hiss opens its door to fill the units, without fanfare. No drama. No theatrics. Reality played out through proper process, stabilizer fins aligned, flight paths calculated, and shock dampeners charged. The skimmer did not roar, it functioned and left. Luthar turned away as the pod bays closed behind them. Lily. Notify me when recon units confirm visual contact. Okay. Alone once more, Luthar returned to his workbench. A newly compressed stasis core hummed softly within its casing, once the size of a hull, now reduced to a coffin-sized shell. The gravitational field inside it was perfectly preserved. His vision was now within reach. No need for orbital construction. At least for now, it was a good solution. And now, a natural chaos generator was tearing through a city far from here, unleashed power with no control. But power, nonetheless. There would be patterns. Data. Perhaps insights into how not to fail as that creature had. Luthar regarded the stabilized PIM core now held within a hardened vault at the lab's edge. Its glow was soft, but its potential was unmatched. Chapter 124, TPM Chapter 122 Failed Test. The hololith shimmered in fractured pulses, its projection littered with static and distorted biometric signatures. Gamma traces laced the edges like ghost fire. Luthar said nothing for a moment. His oculars narrowed. The forge's dim glow reflected off floating strands of gene-sequenced material rotating in stasis. He was already gone when they arrived, Lily reported. Expected, Luthar answered. The Hulk is not the kind of entity to remain in one location. He studied the oscillating DNA helix above the console. Gamma strands shifted unpredictably, patterns corrupted by metaphysical instability. Banner's form is saturated with dimensional anchors. He is not mutating, he's anchored, bound to the one below all. Lily's voice sharpened slightly. So he's a dead end. No, Luthar murmured and decided to shift his focus as he tapped a rune on the cogitator, and the interface flared to life. Deploy the field unit. Harlem. Target, Blonsky. Wait until the transformation is complete, then engage. The wind whistled between broken structures in Harlem, skeletal scaffolds clung to the sides of half-finished buildings, and the distant wail of sirens echoed without urgency. 5 Skitarii emerged from the shadows like spirits of metal and judgment. Their armor was bronze red, etched in sigils of machine logic no human mind could decipher. They moved in formation, flawless, efficient. Leading them was an alpha, his movements deliberate, a transonic blade at his hip. 2 Vanguard troopers flanked him, radium carbines humming with barely contained radiation. A ranger, rail slim and hunched beneath a galvanic rifle, watched from the rear. The 5th, an agile rust stalker, drifted between them with twitching, insectal steps. No words were spoken. No exhaust. No sound but the hiss of environmental seals and the crunch of shattered concrete beneath metal boots. General Ross frowned, standing near a transport. Who authorized this? A nearby soldier checked his tablet. No transponder match, sir. Not on any active roster. Banner, watching them approach, muttered, "They're not yours." "That's for damn sure." Betty stepped forward. "They're heading straight for." A roar exploded from the far side of the block. The abomination smashed through the wall of a collapsed warehouse, concrete flying like shrapnel. His monstrous form twisted with brute muscle and warped bone, eyes ablaze with gamma-born hatred. The Skitarii didn't falter. One emitted a distorted transmission. Gamma signature confirmed. Target profile, unknown. Engagement directive, combat effectiveness trial. Authorization level, tier 2 wargear. Weapons powered on. Radium carbines clicked into active load. Arc rifle sparked with chained voltage. The ranger's optics narrowed, acquiring target locks with machine precision. Ross barked at a nearby comms officer, "Get SHIELD on the line." Now. He needed to know if these things belonged to SHIELD. Abomination moved first, on all fours, feral, crashing toward them in a blur of rage and motion. The Alpha fired. An arc beam lanced out, striking the creature's shoulder and ripping into flesh with crackling light. Abomination growled, but didn't stop. He hit the front line like a meteor. The Rust Stalker was caught mid-lunge and hurled into a wall. His body didn't rise. The others retaliated instantly. A radium fire raked across Abomination's torso, slugs embedding and detonating. Chunks of flesh tore free in bursts of sizzling gamma light. The Ranger's galvanic rifle cracked again and again, each shot a hammer of precision. For a moment, a brief, tactical moment, they had the advantage. In the forge, Luthar observed silently. Data poured in, feedback loops, regenerative metrics, synaptic delays. Bone density, 3.2x human norm. Tissue response, delayed. Cortical integrity, strain threshold 88%. Crude, he muttered. But instructive. One Vanguard moved to flank and fired an arc pistol into Abomination's exposed spine. The creature shrieked, muscles spasming uncontrollably. Another Scitarii closed in, blade slicing deep into a tendon. Abomination dropped to a knee. But instead of submitting, his eyes locked with inhuman clarity. His back arched, and with a sudden roar, he twisted, grabbing the vanguard by the legs and tearing him apart like scrap metal. The remaining two fired point blank, but their blasts only scorched. Abomination hurled himself into the ranger. The galvanic rifle shattered. The body crumpled. Only the alpha remained. Wounded, one arm torn loose, he activated a failsafe. Radiation flared as his damaged battery ruptured, bathing the area in an invisible pulse. "General," the soldier barked, tapping his earpiece. "Shield says those aren't theirs, and they're picking up high-level radiation across Harlem." Ross turned to Banner. "Any idea why super soldiers have this much radiation?" "I'm a scientist, not a magician," Banner said grimly. "Without a sample, I can't tell you the source, but whatever they are, we need to evacuate civilians. Now." The SHIELD agent's voice crackled through the comms. "General Ross, you'd better prepare yourself. You're going to have a lot to explain." Back at the forge, Luthar stood silent as the signal from the last Scitarii faded. The hololift displayed a final flash of static. "Field unit lost," Lily said quietly. "They nearly succeeded." "They failed," Luthar replied flatly. "And that is the only result that matters." He tapped a control rune. A secondary console displayed Abomination's degraded vitals, healing strained, rage cycle disrupted, and neural fluctuations erratic. "That's really a bad result." He paused, optics dimming slightly. "If they weren't expendable, I could have equipped them with better gear than perhaps they would have succeeded." Luthar turned from the display. "If the local authorities manage to get their hands on any of the units," he muttered, "then peace will be the first casualty. I'll have to waste time in skirmishes just to retrieve my belongings." He looked to the weapons rack, then to the forge's sealed vaults. "Why is it always me who has to go to the battlefield?" he inquired aloud, his tone bordering on bitterness. "In a real novel, I'd be unearthing ancient tech, not battling mutated creatures." With that thought, he made his decision. Stronger units with disposable pawns, so there won't be the same situation like today, where he has to go to the battlefield personally just to pick up some scraps. Or. Chapter 125, TPM Chapter 123, Cold Iron and Gamma Blood. Chapter 123, Cold Iron and Gamma Blood. Harlem, Ground Zero. Smoke drifted in long, oily ribbons. Firelight shimmered off broken glass and twisted steel. The scorched crater where the last Scitarii detonated still hissed, steam rising like breath from a dying engine. Amid the toxic haze, the Abomination stood unbowed. Muscle tore, healed, and tore again across his limbs, struggling to regenerate against the radiation clawing at his cells. One eye bled freely. His left shoulder was blackened, veins pulsing erratically beneath the skin. But he was still alive. He turned with a growl toward the last figure standing, a single Scitarii Alpha, damaged but not yet down. The tech priest's emissary had one arm hanging limp, armor shattered at the torso, and half its facial optics blown out. The two locked eyes. No words. Just the stillness before violence. High above, nestled in the broken rafters of a crumbling tenement, Brock Rumlow watched through the scope of a custom-modified anti-material rifle. His breathing was steady, but his hands trembled. "Let's see how this thing likes tungsten alloy." He squeezed the trigger. The round screamed through the haze, and struck Abomination square in the back. Skin and muscle were torn apart. For half a second, the monster staggered. Then, slowly, the wound sealed. Skin crawled back into place, muscle reknit, and the roar that followed shook the entire street. Rumlow's expression soured. Damn it. Below, the Scitarii lunged forward, but it was too late, and he was too weak to change anything. Abomination's fist crashed down, crushing the machine soldier's head into the pavement, metal splitting like a fruit under pressure. Sparks hissed. Fluids leaked. The body collapsed, twitching once, then went still. Abomination exhaled and then looked straight at Rumlow's location. At just a little distance, the rotors thumped in the sky. From the open side of the tactical helicopter, General Ross stared down at the glowing wound carved into Harlem. Even through layers of shielding and reinforced glass, the scorched epicenter of the explosion radiated an unnatural heat. A flare of blue-white energy licked across the crater edge, then vanished. A soldier leaned toward him, headset crackling. "Sir, radiation sensors just redlined. This isn't residual gamma, it's something else. We don't even have the markers for it." Ross didn't answer immediately. His jaw flexed once. Then, those soldiers just came out of nowhere. He leaned closer to the edge, voice rough. "Now they're all gone." Beside him, Bruce Banner adjusted the strap across his chest. His fingers twitched unconsciously against his thigh, eyes locked on the crater where the Scitarii had detonated. Through the smoke, the monstrous outline of Abomination limped forward, wounded, yes. But alive. Still healing. They weren't humans, Bruce muttered, more to himself than anyone else. It looks like somebody is turning soldiers into cyborgs. Ross snorted. That's too stupid. It would have been better if that money had been on the super soldier project, even after so many setbacks. Ross still believes the super soldiers are much better. As for cyborgs, they would be too expensive. Betty, sitting opposite Bruce, held her gaze on the burning horizon. So what are we going to do now? If this continues, the city will be gone. No one had an answer. Ross turned toward the crewmen again. Any more contact from ground units? Civilians. Negative, sir. The NYPD perimeter is holding, but they're pulling back. Nobody wants to go near that radiation signature. Bruce's voice dropped lower, quiet but urgent. There is something about the way they exploded. It's like they were engineered to explode if they failed. Whoever sent them didn't care if they made it back. Betty shot him a look. Like they were, disposable. Ross growled under his breath. A damn expensive disposable unit, who has that much money? Outside, the Abomination roared again, low, guttural, the kind of sound that stuck in the chest and got more than the ears. His shadow grew longer as he began moving, not in aimless fury, but with direction. Betty leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Where's he going now? Ross stepped back and barked to the pilot. Get us higher, keep eyes on the target. But Bruce already knew. He'd seen that moment of connection, when the monster turned its head not at random, but toward something. Or someone. He was hit by something else just before that last kill, Bruce said. Betty's eyes widened. Someone else is down there. Ross's voice turned to the communications officer. How long until S.H.I.E.L.D. arrives on station? The officer hesitated, earpiece crackling. Sir, they've declined deployment. Ross's eyes narrowed. What the hell do you mean, declined? They've suffered heavy casualties in a previous engagement, the officer continued. Something about the Hell's Kitchen mass kidnapping incident, they had internal losses. Ross said with an angry voice, it's just a loss of some soldiers who are not even from S.H.I.E.L.D. or the military who care about the type of loss. They're saying that same person might get involved, and they need to get special permission from the council before they can dispatch. Ross growled under his breath. Cowards hiding behind protocol. This is exactly why we should have closed down S.H.I.E.L.D. These guys are completely useless and a waste of money. Bruce Banner, arms crossed beside the window, murmured, they're not wrong to be cautious. If there is alien involvement, we should be more careful. It's not that he didn't want to transform, but for some reason, he had faith someone else was going to stop the monster. He was definitely not wrong, as there was a place where someone was preparing. Back at the lab, Luthar stood in silence before the projection node, hollow screens flickering across his field of vision. The data from the last Scutari's detonation was still fresh, gamma scatter, cellular destabilization, and signs of synaptic degeneration in the Abomination's brain stem. Behind him, the software of servos approached. Should I go instead of you? Lily's voice was measured but held concern beneath the modulation. She stood in full gear, sleek armor laced with microservos and an untested prototype power weapon latched to her back. Luthar didn't look at her. No. Why, she pressed. My current weapon should be good enough. They're unproven, he interrupted. We haven't even finished field testing. Hearing this, Lily stepped aside as Luthar extended a hand toward the teleportation dais, its ancient circuitry awakening with clicks, groans, and pulses of electric blue light. Binary liturgy spilled from the machine spirit's mouth. Coordinates locked, Harlem strike zone. Stabilizer field active. Noospheric uplink, secure. A lance of white light enveloped him, and then he was gone. Rumlow lay crumpled against a collapsed wall, blood leaking from the corner of his mouth. His rifle, cracked in half, lay beside him. One eye was swollen shut, the other, artificial and blood red, whirred and clicked as it struggled to focus on the behemoth before him. The Abomination loomed above, massive, breathing hard, and still steaming from residual radiation. A bone spike jutted from his forearm like a blade, lifted high. Rumlow tried to rise. He couldn't. His enhanced musculature, augmented by what he had bought him time to react. The synthetic heart kept him from passing out. Reinforced ribs had snapped but not shattered. At least for now. Pity, Abomination sneered, voice gurgling. It's sad to see such a good soldier die. Then. Crack. A thunderous impact echoed across the rooftop, followed by a hum of artificial gravity collapsing in on itself. Luthar had arrived. He stood atop a ruinous metal pipe, his cloak trailing smoke, servo arms unfurling with eerie grace. An arc pistol shimmered in his other hand. Abomination turned slowly. Another one. Come here to die. Luthar didn't answer immediately. He stepped down onto the rubble-strewn rooftop, one motion at a time, like a judgment rendered in brass and blood. "No. I am just here to catch you," he said coldly. The abomination snarled. Big words from a trash can. Luthar completely ignoring his words raised. His pistol, charged with an energy no Earth lab had ever measured. "Let me measure your durability personally." Chapter 126, TPM Chapter 124, Beast of Rage and Iron Blade. The ground smoked where the last Skitarii had fallen, its remains twisted into slag and scorched metal. Abomination's chest heaved with exertion, though no fatigue marked his posture, only instinctual bloodlust, sharpened by mutation and unchecked anger. Then the wind shifted. A soundless pulse passed through the air, subtle, unnatural. Space distorted by the briefest flicker of violet light. He arrived. Luthar optics gleamed behind his mask, multiple data lenses rotating in synchronized whirs as his gaze swept across the devastated block. Smoke curled around his armored frame, caught in the faint hum of a distortion field. He carried no visible weapon until he moved. A gesture, subtle. A mechadendrite slithered forward, handing him a weapon forged in secrecy, a Martian pattern graviton arc carbine, humming with restrained annihilation. Across the ruined street, General Ross froze beside the wrecked command vehicle. Beside him, Bruce Banner's eyes narrowed as the newcomer stepped forward, heedless of danger. "What the hell is another freak?" Ross began, raising binoculars. Betty's voice was low and uncertain. "He doesn't look human." Bruce didn't respond. His gaze was fixed. The abomination turned and roared like a beast that was ready to tear everything apart. Luthar calmly raised the carbine. He fired once. The round struck abomination dead center, no explosion, no sound, only force. A crushing field warped gravity itself, condensing Blonsky's chest inward for a split second before the beast stumbled, snarling in fury. Of course, it didn't kill him, it's just irrelevant to him. Luthar adjusted. No second shot. He was waiting now. The monster lunged. A concrete cracking blow, wide enough to pulp an APC, swung toward the priest's head. Luthar didn't move, he didn't need to, as he had already calculated the impact strength. The strike landed and bounced. An energy field shimmered pale blue for a fraction of a second. The kinetic force dispersed in waves across an invisible barrier hugging his skin, a conversion field, too finely tuned for this world. Abomination staggered, confused by the lack of damage. From the distant sidelines, Ross stared in disbelief. Did that thing just block a full hit? Banner exhaled slowly. That looks like an energy barrier, adaptive. Self-modulating. His tone shifted, he didn't understand how the technology had advanced that much. Luthar turned his head slightly. The mechanical voice that followed was modulated and neutral but carried the edge of judgment. He took the first step, then another step forward. "You are all about brute force, not even suitable to become cannon fodder." He raised the carbine again. No haste. Just calibration. The abomination, hearing this, got angry and prepared to use his strength. He charged with reckless abandon, limbs rippling with mutated muscle, concrete cracking under each thunderous step. The air itself seemed to recoil from the force of his approach. Luthar dropped the carbine with calm deliberation, metal clattering against the broken asphalt, forgotten. As the creature's clawed hand swung toward him in a vicious arc, Luthar stepped forward, not back, into the blow's path. The strike came. But it never landed. Luthar's hand shot up and caught the abomination's forearm mid-swing. The impact should have pulverized a tank. Instead, it stopped cold, servomotors whirring with barely audible strain as Luthar's skeletal fingers locked around the beast's wrist. Before the abomination could register what happened, a blade deployed. Humming low, its phase field whispered reality into pieces, a slender, high-frequency monomolecular vibroblade asterisk, its edge flickering faintly with a distortion halo. Luthar dragged the weapon in a clean arc across the inside of the abomination's arm, slicing tendon and sinew-like fabric. The creature screamed, howled, jerking backward violently. Flesh recoiled from the wound as if trying to escape the damage. The cut hadn't merely torn, it had rewritten part of the monster's biology, leaving a gap the body struggled to interpret, let alone heal. Abomination staggered, clutching the mutilated limb. Luthar stood motionless. "Stop struggling," he said. Another roar. Abomination lunged again, mouth wide, intent on tearing him apart with fang and fury. Luthar waited. Then moved, smooth and unhurried. He shifted to the side, let the beast's momentum overreach, and slammed his augmented palm upward, seizing the creature's lower jaw mid-bite. With inhuman strength, he wrenched the head back, exposing the throat and gullet. The carbine still lay on the ground. Luthar's eyes flicked as he, in one fluid motion, retrieved with precision. In a single motion, he raised the carbine once more. And jammed it into the abomination's mouth. KRRMMM, ZZZHM, KRRMMM. The graviton arc carbine unleashed point-blank hell. Space folded violently. Gravity condensed inside the monster's skull, imploding nerves, cracking bone from within. The first blast made the eyes bulge. The second collapsed the sinus cavity into dust. The third part cooked frontal lobe into black eye core. Abomination stumbled, screamed, vomited blood and shattered teeth. His regeneration faltered, not failing, but confused, unstable. Smoke poured from his throat. His shriek was wet and guttural, no longer angry but desperate. Luthar released him and started thinking about what to do. Killing him is easy, but it feels like it would be a waste. As for studying him to create more green monsters, he wasn't interested in unstable soldiers. For the first few seconds, Luthar just stood over the crippled beast, its spasms slowing into twitching groans. Smoke hissed from its jaw. The air was thick with a chemical stench, blood, ozone, and ruptured muscle. He turned slightly, gaze drifting to the distant observers of the helicopter, which was getting closer. He lifted his wrist and spoke, voice cold and clipped. Lily. Prepare a containment place for the new guest. A faint beep confirmed she had received the message. After this, Luthar started walking to Rumlow, who was still on the ground, broken but alive. Chapter 127, TPM Chapter 125, Cold Logic. The battlefield hissed with aftershocks, steam, blood, and ozone curling in the evening air. Scorched pavement cracked under slow-burning heat, and all that remained of the abomination's rampage were shattered buildings, a ruined street. Luthar stepped away from the crumpled green form of the beast, his robes unstained, his form unbowed. The abomination lay twitching, not dead, but broken. Black ichor bubbled from its jaw, half its face caved in from within. Regeneration had halted, stalled beneath the weight of impossible trauma. He lifted his wrist and spoke, voice cold and clipped. Lily. Prepare a containment unit for our new guest. A faint beep confirmed the message. High in the sky, General Ross lowered his binoculars with deliberate slowness, his mouth pressed into a hard line. Jesus Christ, he muttered. Beside him, Bruce Banner's eyes narrowed. That can't be real technology. The way it cuts Blonsky's flesh, it's impossible. Ross said nothing. His knuckles turned white around the steel rail of the mobile command platform. Betty stared, her voice barely audible. Is he going to kill him? No, Bruce answered. Maybe he wants to study for him. Ross turned toward Banner, voice hard. So you're telling me he made the strongest super soldier scream like a wounded dog, and he wants to study him? Then go and ask him what he wants, Bruce said flatly. Ross looked at Bruce and started to think about whether this boy wanted to kill him, as the person in red robes was definitely not a good person, and going near him would be like throwing yourself into a fire, for which he had no plan. On the ground, Luthar's boots made no sound as he approached another motionless figure, one not dead, not unconscious, just broken. Rumlow lay half buried in debris. Twisted limbs, armor slashed and half fused to his skin, internal augmetics blinking through torn synthetic flesh. His second transformation had rebuilt him after Harlem's earlier disaster. Even that hadn't been enough. His red, artificial eyes, flickering targeting augments, tracked Luthar's approach. Mr. Luthar, he croaked. Not reverence. Reconditioning. You still function, the tech priest said indifferently. Structural integrity is at 41%. You are one step away from being recycled. Rumlow tried to rise. Chemical suppressants flooded his spine to compensate for pain thresholds. You said last time I'd be stronger. And you are, Luthar replied, kneeling. But strength without adaptation is just metal waiting to rust. That thing wasn't natural. Neither are you, Luthar said flatly. You were reshaped, twice. Optimized. Yet failure still follows. Rumlow gritted his teeth. Then what now? Luthar tilted his head. Understand this, there are always stronger things. Survival is not guaranteed by force. It is earned through calculation. A pause. Then something flickered in Rumlow's eyes, confusion, perhaps even shame. I don't even know why I'm fighting. How can I think about the calculation? It's because your emotions are still interfering, Luthar said, standing. Victory and failure are meaningless. For you, what is important is to complete my task. He lifted his wrist again. Lily. Send servitors. Collect all materials. He turned away without looking back. There was one more place he needed to visit, the origin of the beast. Dr. Samuel Stern's lab, outskirts of Harlem. The remnants of the lab stood like a cancerous scar across the city's edge, glass warped, walls sagging, lights flickering without purpose. Luthar entered without ceremony. He stepped over a burned-out computer terminal and paused at a shattered observation window. Chemical tanks lined the walls, half broken, half drained. DNA vats leaked across the floor. He made a sound, barely audible. TCH, primitive. And yet they still lost control. He moved forward with purpose, sensors sweeping. Behind a toppled desk, a familiar figure groaned. Dr. Samuel Stearns, pale, frantic, and struggling to crawl, looked up, blood staining his lab coat. What are you? Luthar knelt and struck him with precision, rendering the scientist unconscious. Don't worry. I'll make sure your brain is put to better use, Luthar muttered, activating a fusion charge from a side compartment of his armor. He placed the device near the main console, no countdown, no flourish. Then he hoisted Stearns over one shoulder, turned, and walked out. 3 seconds later. The explosion wasn't large, but it was efficient. A soft ripple of pressure, followed by the collapse of the entire structure. Molecular disintegration surged outward, consuming everything in silence. Luthar didn't look back. Lily, he said over the vox. Prepare a containment pod for a biological unknown. No neural interface. No weaponization protocol, yet. A pause. Then a faint, mechanical chime. Acknowledged. Smoke still rose behind him, but Luthar walked forward toward the shuttle, his step steady as morning approached. The aftermath was complete. Blonsky. Dr. Samuel Stearns. Rumlow. His broken Skitarii. With everything resolved, Luthar finally returned to his quarters, and for the first time in 2 standard cycles, he allowed himself a calculated indulgence. Sleep. Hours later, Luthar's eyes opened. He rose from the meditative chamber, silent and immediate. No stretching. No pause. His rest cycle had completed on schedule, precisely 3 standard hours. He walked without alerting the servitors, moving past the observation room toward a reinforced containment chamber deep within the Forge Lab's lower sanctum. The chamber lights dimmed as he entered. Stearns groaned within the containment capsule. His skull had begun to elongate, green veins pulsing beneath the skin. Data probes danced over his form, transmitting readings into the air. Luthar observed in silence, then activated the internal vox. Dr. Samuel Stearns, he said flatly. I hope you had a good time. Stearns blinked, his voice sluggish. You're not from the military. Correct, Luthar replied. You are in a controlled environment where I need to give you special treatment. Stearns laughed weakly. You don't look like a doctor who can give treatment. You will learn I am much better than many doctors. I'm someone who can keep his patients alive even after removing their brains. A hololithic skin displayed Stearns' neural structure, web and chaotic, a lattice of gamma-activated potential spiraling without control. Your brain is mutating, which is quite a terrible situation for you. As your mutation becomes too much, I might have to take extreme measures. Stearns struggled to move. I don't think, can I get just some? You won't be getting anything. The tech priest approached, watching Stearns' vitals. The thoughts you're having are quite dangerous. If you continue your thoughts, I might have to do what I should have already done with a mutated creature like you. Stearns coughed violently, his eyes glassy. I didn't do anything wrong, I was forced. The mutation was an accident, not my fault. For some reason, he felt compelled to explain himself, as if silence might cost him his life. Luthar stepped back. Your mind is now a case study. You will be catalogued, observed, and modified to make you more controllable. If all fails, then I can only give you mercy. He turned away, already setting up the new command lock neural input. No cognitive stimulants. Begin the skin cycle every 1 minute. A brief pause, then he left. The door hissed closed behind him, and the lights dimmed. Chapter 128, TPM Chapter 126, Creative Deviations. The sanctum was silent, save for the soft hum of void-shielded servitors and the whisper of cogitators devouring foreign data. Beyond the vaulted dome of the Forge Lab, the sky above was still black. Luthar stood motionless at the central command room, framed in shadow, as hundreds of scout drones launched silently from their cradles, sleek and predatory, vanishing into the night. Each drone carried custom data absorption engines, tuned to siphon electromagnetic signatures, digital frameworks, biotech readings, and energy emissions. Stark Tower. AIM. Wakandan satellites. All were marked. Continue acquisition, Luthar intoned. One of the drones chirped a compliance rune as it warped into camouflage and vanished. He returned to his inner sanctum, passing through hexagonal doorways that dilated with mechanical grace. A projection bloomed before him, helices of data, DNA strands rotating like cathedral spires. Thousands. Some human. Others not. For too long, he muttered, adjusting a chemical focus lens on the nearest strand, I dismissed this branch of study as I did not have the time. The words were not regretful. They were recorded. The helix pulsed, his own. Segments glowed red, annotated with binaric glyphs indicating surgical augmentation, nanitic overlays, and spliced Martian optimization. Others glowed blue, alien, acquired from Mechaniku's archives. Still others were yellow, unclassified deviations. Luthar's ocular lenses hummed softly, splitting their focus across dual hololithic arrays. One displayed genetic archetypes designed by sages. They spun and unraveled before him, the perfect gene lines of ancient warriors, the failures of corrupted clones, and his modified DNA, spliced with vault-sealed sequences once forbidden even to the most magi biologists. Beside it, another stream came alive, necron constructs. Their living metal, necrodermis, flowed in simulation, a material that thought. Luthar's enhanced mind processed both streams in tandem, not as a contradiction but a complement. He did not blink as the two fields merged on his screen. Silence followed. Only the cogitator's low pulse, the breathing of machines. Then. A soft hiss. The door opened. Lily stepped through, her arms folded around a nutrition pack wrapped in sterile foil. Looking at him, she said, "Didn't you say you were planning to take a break from your work after finishing PIM particles?" He didn't turn. "It's not work. It's studying." "Both are two different things," he murmured. "It's the same thing, as even your study is related to work." Saying this, she handed over the nutrition pack. He accepted the pack without comment, setting it beside a tray of surgical servo skulls. Lily glanced at the suspended genetic field. "You're not studying the gamma mutants anymore." "I don't need to study gamma and mutants," Luthar replied. "Plus, I got something better to study." A flick of his hand brought up a composite between a necron alloy and human neuromorphic scaffolding. "Structural replication and my own family's genetic knowledge, one would make future constructions easy, and the other will help with genetic enhancements." His voice didn't rise. It never did. But the hunger in it was real. Lily observed him silently for a moment, then spoke in a measured tone. "You might consider studying your own digestion first. As for the construction replication, they can wait until Hephaestus and the others complete their study." Luthar remained silent, he couldn't explain why the study mattered to him. Normally, he held no secrets from Lily, after all, efficiency thrived on transparency, but this was different. He could not discuss his system, which was feeding him fragments of knowledge from the entire 40K universe, as long as he continued his research. However, he couldn't reveal this to her, who knew what entities might be listening. In comparison, his identity as an outsider was not that important. "That's going to be hard, as they are still back in the dungeon world, which means when I get them to this universe, they won't have too much knowledge," he said, trying to finish the nutrition pack. "Then just get them here quickly so they can continue the study with you, which would be more effective," she suggested. Luthar, looking at the energy model, said, "Well, it would take a few more weeks to have enough energy to go and bring them to this universe." As Luthar and Lily continued their daily life, there was another person who was having a meltdown. Inside the SHIELD headquarters, the surveillance room was filled with the smell of coffee and stress. Monitors flickered, casting an eerie pallor over Director Fury's face as he reviewed the Harlem footage again. There it was, frame by frame. Rumlow's body was augmented far beyond that of someone who was just supposed to work as a security guard and do spy work for SHIELD. Luthar. Fury clenched his jaw, fingers drumming against the table. "This is a goddamn joke," he muttered, the voice barely audible. He rewound again. Rumlow's posture. The way he deferred. Subtle markers of conditioning, **** reprogramming****. 2 agents, Fury growled. 2. Both planted. Both compromised. Maria Hill, standing stiffly at his side, glanced at the screen. "It's not just them, sir. We lost visuals in the Harlem lab 3 hours after the encounter. Satellite sweep shows it's gone." Fury's one eye narrowed. "And you think that was an accident?" "No, Director." He turned, tension burning behind every word. Abomination might be weaker than Hulk, but it was something no military can contend with. Even so, he has been captured. Hill remained silent. Either we're dealing with someone playing 10 steps ahead, or he is not playing the same game. Fury leaned back. "And I hate both possibilities." There was a pause. Then Hill asked, "Should we inform Stark?" Fury exhaled slowly. "No need. He's already too depressed. No need to increase his anxiety." What he didn't know was that Stark might be depressed, but he was still keeping tabs on the entire situation around the world. Tony Stark stared out across the skyline, fingers tight around a glass of green liquid he pretended to call breakfast. The light of the afternoon sun did nothing to warm the cold hum gnawing at his core, literally. The arc reactor still thrummed quietly in his chest, but the palladium levels were spiking again. The temporary fixes weren't holding. But even that wasn't the biggest weight. On the screen behind him, freeze frames of Luthar walking through a wall of flame, Rumlow kneeling, Abomination falling. Stark scoffed bitterly. "Right. Magic tech priest with god-tier weapons and soldiers built like radioactive tanks. And here I am, still running on poison and band-aids." Jarvis's voice chimed softly. Sir, the comparative energy outputs from Luthar's zombie soldiers exceed our current arc reactor designs by approximately 423%. Yeah, Jay, I noticed, Tony muttered. That's why I've been rewriting the Mk8 armor spec since 4 a.m. He downed the drink, winced, then tossed the glass into the sink. I still don't know if this is an arms race or a funeral march. As he prepared himself for today's work, Luthar's mini-drones had already begun to pick up technology around the world, and one of them finally arrived at the most advanced country in the world. High above the borders of Wakanda, something small shimmered in the sky. No larger than a coin, the drone moved in silence, its surface cloaked in layered phase absorption plating. A Mechanic-Use survey construct. Observational only. For now. Below it, the vibranium-rich forests of Wakanda. The drone paused for a moment, scanning, cataloging, watching. At least for now, no one could notice him. Author's note, help me with advice or with cash to improve this novel. Chapter 129, TPM Chapter 127, Invisible Thief of Wakanda. For the next several weeks, Luthar did not create anything new. Instead, he refined. The Forge Lab echoed with the measured hum of precision fabricators and the methodical click of Mechanic-Use cogitators. Scarab units, once crude prototypes, underwent successive iterations under his tireless supervision. Each frame was hollowed and fitted with subdermal reservoirs for PIM particle compression and micromining rigs that spun faster than conventional drills could hope to match. Their metallic limbs were compact and flexible, their neural cores optimized for independent operation. Unlike the data harvesting scouts, coin-sized, equipped with cloaking fields, and optimized for digital infiltration, the Scarabs had a different mandate. They were extraction units. And their destination was Wakanda. Across the hidden borders of that ancient land, in the deep loam beneath vibranium-rich forests, energy signatures began to flicker, strange and unstable. The Council of Wakanda noticed. So did their satellites, their vibranium mesh sensors, and the ancestral protocols embedded in the oldest corners of their systems. Still, nothing is clear. Nothing traceable. Until one Scarab, accidentally detected by a sensor during a sample acquisition, was caught mid-operation. The Wakanda perimeter defenses were activated. The Scarab, sensing entrapment, triggered its failsafe, a directional nanoboom designed to destroy itself and scatter all residual traces of its mechanical code. The explosion was minimal, almost surgical, leaving no trace. Within minutes, the Dora Milaje stood over the scorched crater, sensors sweeping the site. A captured image from the moment before detonation gave them the first visual, blurry, mouse-sized, and encased in unnatural metal. Worse than the image was the absence it revealed. Dozens of meters of vibranium vanished. Extracted with surgical precision from beneath bedrock and transport shielding. No seismic activity. No tunnel collapses. Just a clean absence. Investigation teams scrambled to assess what was missing. Panic did not set in, but silence did. Theories flowed like water. Nanotheft. Particle tunneling. Extratemporal breach. Only one conclusion was shared: whoever sent those machines possessed a level of technology that rivaled, if not exceeded, their own. In the heart of the Royal Scientific Wing, one analyst muttered, adjusting his lenses, whoever it is, they knew exactly what they were looking for. We've confirmed vibranium losses at multiple sites. There are no signature trails, another added, gesturing to the floating hologram. Not even radio waves to control them. Whoever this thief is, they're beyond anything we've seen, or they're not from this earth. In the corner of the lab, a little girl leaned over a panel twice her size, eyes gleaming with curiosity behind a pair of augmented lenses. Shuri. They're not from Earth, she echoed with a grin. You're saying we got robbed by aliens now? Her tone was playful, but her fingers danced across the console with growing precision. Diagrams bloomed before her, scraps of data from the Scarab's destruction, fragments of the strange metal casing. I wouldn't joke too much, little sister, a voice murmured from the entrance. Okoye entered, flanked by two guards. She carried a tablet, her expression grim. Because if this happens again, we may be forced to respond. And I do not wish to explain to the Queen how an entire defense perimeter was bypassed without a single alarm. Shuri turned, raising an eyebrow. Technically, it did trigger an alarm. It's just that the drone exploded after 2 seconds, leaving us with no clue to follow. Okoye did not look amused. But even if we find the person behind the theft, Shuri said quickly, we can't do too much. Then, under her breath, from the looks of it, whoever's behind this isn't an easy person to deal with. She tapped one image, metal folding like organic flesh, PIM-like distortions, impossibly precise cuts. PIM particles, she murmured. At least now we know how they were able to take out that much vibranium from our country. While preparations were being made to escalate the investigation, Luthar stood elsewhere, far removed from Wakandan scrutiny. He faced a suspended hololithic feed, one hand clasped behind his back as he reviewed the Scarab's final 10 seconds of visual input. The outline of Wakandan scanning beams, the distortion field rupture, and the detonation trigger all played in perfect silence. He showed no frustration. No urgency. That's going to be troublesome, he said softly. It will be harder to get more vibranium now. Lily glanced up from her terminal. So what are you going to do next? Delay the next extraction until they become overconfident. Or... He paused with a dry smile, in my free time, just conquer them. You're pushing the line, Lily said cautiously. It's one thing to steal a little, but now you want to take over the country. Luthar did not answer. Instead, he activated a small containment unit on the side of the lab. A shard of raw vibranium floated within, compressed to a fraction of its original size using PIM distortion fields. Let me tell you this, he said quietly. If I built you clothing from vibranium, you'd be immune to most attacks. That vibranium would be extremely valuable to us. Of course, if I found another deposit in space, I'd ignore Wakanda entirely. His gaze drifted from the containment unit to a new screen. A blinking map of Eastern Europe began to populate with data. He was shifting his focus, from Wakanda to Russia. Specifically, to a man not yet fully formed, Ivan Vanko. The future villain of Iron Man 2 was, at this point, still living in obscurity with his father, Anton Vanko. The man would likely die in the coming months. Luthar's mind weighed the equation. Ivan's intelligence was average at best, but there was some utility in his work. Still, his refusal to submit and his pride and volatility made him difficult to predict, perhaps too troublesome. Luthar's mind had already mapped out every scenario involving Ivan Vanko. Recruiting him would end in betrayal. Attempting to brainwash him quickly would risk catastrophic neural damage. A slower, subtler reprogramming was equally futile. Vanko was the type to rig explosives beneath his own lab just to make a dramatic exit before fleeing to fight Iron Man. He understood the man's character, prideful, volatile, and wholly uninterested in loyalty. A tool wrapped in rusted iron and too much ego. Well, Luthar muttered to himself, fingers tapping the edge of the console, no point chasing a time bomb when I can wait for something more stable. His eyes drifted to the containment bay, where another sequence slowly counted upward, energy convergence climbing toward 100%. Better to focus on the real objective. To bring the goddesses and the blacksmith into this world, beings who would not betray him, who understood true purpose, and who could help him. Chapter 130, TPM Chapter 128, A Cold Offer. Russia, outskirts of St. Petersburg. Winter wind, -12 degrees Celsius. Time, 3:14 a.m. Lily hated the cold. The snow crunched beneath her boots as she trudged down the uneven road, puffing warm air into her gloves with a melodramatic pout. Her fur-lined white cloak fluttered around her like a frost-kissed angel, though the scowl on her face made her look more like an annoyed fox than a celestial envoy. I swear, next time I won't be accepting such a stupid mission, she mumbled, arms folded tightly against her chest. Who sends their favorite girl into Siberia just to talk to two drunk old men? Stupid Luthar and his stupid plans. She slipped slightly on a patch of black ice and nearly face-planted into a frozen mailbox. Her wings fluttered out reflexively to balance her, earning a loud protest from a nearby crow. She muttered at the bird on the road, "Why are you not shivering?" Of course, the bird couldn't reply, it just ignored her and flew away. The shack appeared at the end of the narrow street, a rust-streaked iron door, a flickering outdoor bulb, and windows half covered in frost. Inside, she could already hear the faint clinking of bottles and the metallic hiss of welding equipment. Dim coughing echoed through the walls. Well, here we go, Lily sighed, fluffing her hair with both hands. Her radiant eyes shimmered in the dark like captured starlight. She gave the door 3 soft knocks, humming a cheerful tune. Inside, Ivan Vanko grunted and turned his head toward the noise. His father, Anton, looked up from his workbench, coughing violently into a rag. "Did you invite someone?" he asked, his voice low and wary. "I haven't invited anyone in 15 years, he muttered. Especially not at 3 in the morning. The door creaked open on its own. Standing at the threshold, framed by a falling curtain of snow, was a girl far too clean, far too beautiful, and far too cheerful for this part of the world. Lily stepped inside without waiting for permission, rubbing her hands together. "Good evening, Vanko family," she beamed. "You've been blessed by Omnissiah." Ivan stared. "What?" Anton blinked. "Are you lost?" She skipped forward, pulling a parchment scroll from inside her cloak and holding it out with both hands. Its surface was inscribed with precise golden script, radiant circuitry coiling around archaic symbols. "You have been chosen by the cult Mechanicus to serve under the divine will of the Omnissiah," Lily said solemnly, though her grin never faded. "You will be initiated by cult Mechanicus and serve under Luthar Farinus Cogbane, most prestigious tech priest." Ivan gave her a long, slow look. "Did someone hit you on the head?" "Oh, don't be rude," Lily huffed, sticking out her tongue. "This is a rare opportunity. Very prestigious. Not many humans get offers like this." Usually, we just catch them. Anton's hand trembled as he reached for the scroll, but his cough stopped him. A fit racked his chest, and blood flecked his lips. Lily knelt beside him immediately, her expression softening with genuine concern. You don't have long, do you? Anton managed a bitter smile. What could I say? Medicine doesn't come for free. Lily nodded gently. The priest knows. That's why I'm here. She held up her hand, and a flickering holographic projection of Anton's internal organs glowed into being, revealing the decaying tissue, the dying liver, and the inflamed lungs. He can give you a new body, she whispered. One that never decays. No pain. No sickness. Filled with the machine god's blessing and will. You can live for eternity. Anton stared at her like a man glimpsing salvation through smoke. Ivan stepped forward. And what's the price? For your father? Lily tilted her head. Faith. And for me? She turned to him then, and her aura shifted subtly. The innocence remained, but something ancient stirred beneath her gaze, like a storm behind stained glass. Absolute loyalty, she said. You'll become a priest of the machine god. You'll learn to communicate with the machine and have a chance to witness miracles with logic. To speak to steel and command weapons beyond the understanding of humans. Ivan's expression tightened. I don't need a god, and definitely not some crazy cult. Everyone needs a god, especially when that god is a concept. Lily said. Luthar wants you under him. The fact that I am sent here to invite you is showing his sincerity. Normally, he would just kidnap you and then put a few bombs, which is much more effective. Cult with explosive tendency. She gave a gleeful giggle. Oh, it is. But we're very friendly. Ivan looked between her and his father. The older man had fallen silent, staring down at the glowing data scroll with wide eyes. What happens if we say no? He asked, arms folded. Then I walked away, Lily replied cheerfully, rising to her feet. No threats. No assassins. Just a missed opportunity. She spun once and sighed dramatically. But Luthar will be annoyed that I spent 2 hours in sub-zero weather just to get rejected. And I will whine about it for weeks. Anton finally found his voice. If I accept, how soon can I get treatment? Lily beamed. Tonight. Ivan raised a brow. And want me? Lily stepped closer, her expression still sweet, but her eyes gleamed with something colder beneath the surface. She gently tapped his nose with a gloved finger. Of course you will come too, she said cheerfully. But if you try anything clever, we'll show you why even hell is considered merciful compared to a Mechanicu's reconditioning vault. Ivan flinched slightly but didn't pull away. His eyes locked on hers, searching for a lie, a hidden agenda. But Lily only smiled, glowing with ethereal warmth that didn't match the ice forming on her cloak. Anton reached forward and touched the metallic scroll Lily had unrolled. The parchment shimmered faintly, its surface lined with etched circuitry and mechanist veins. A soft click sounded, followed by a pulse that ran from the scroll up Anton's arm. The glow sank into his chest, and, suddenly, his coughing stopped. He sat back in his chair, chest rising steadily for the first time in weeks. Color slowly returned to his cheeks. Ivan's eyes widened. What the hell was that? Lily smiled gently, closing the scroll and returning it to her satchel. A field-release medical lattice, nanostimulants paired with targeted neurocleanse agents. It's not a cure, but he would enjoy this, he wants to die before his transformation. She turned to Ivan, reaching into her coat and producing a small vial. And this is yours, she said. It'll help you sober up. Reason better. Ivan didn't move. He stared at the vial and then at his father. Finally, he took it from her hand, slowly, deliberately. You'll regret it if you try to control me, he warned. Lily tilted her head, eyes sparkling with amusement. The Omnissiah already wrote your path. I'm just the delivery girl. Authors thought, well, at least now, people would not panic that all the cult members he is collecting are cute girls. By the way, have $5 per month as a higher tier for those who want to go the extra mile in helping, but I don't want to reduce the benefit for people who are paying less. So I had given shoutouts. But looks like it's not enough to attract more people, so I am looking for new suggestions. $4, $1, $2 to $. Chapter 131, TPM Chapter 129, Return Flight. Russia, Forest Outskirts, 4:12 a.m. The frozen branches groaned in protest as Lily led the Vankos, father and son, down a narrow, snow-covered path. Ivan still looked half skeptical, hands stuffed in his coat pockets, while Anton followed with a faint but steady step. The medical lattice in his bloodstream had worked wonders, though his face bore the exhaustion of many years. Then they saw it. The drop-wing skimmer sat nestled in a clearing like some predatory bird awaiting command. Matte gray armor plates curved smoothly across its body, and its wings, angular, folded, and razor-edged, gleamed faintly in the pale moonlight. Anti-gravity coils glowed beneath the hull, keeping the craft suspended silently above the frost-hardened earth. Anton blinked. That's not Russian. Nope. Lily chirped, spinning on one heel and gesturing grandly. Custom-built by Luthar himself. Probably cost more than your entire military budget. Ivan stepped cautiously toward it. You know how to fly this thing? Lily tilted her head. Well, obviously. You sure? He asked skeptically. You look like you need a booster seat. Of course I'm sure. I got here in one piece, didn't I? That doesn't mean you flew it well, Ivan muttered. Instead of answering, Lily gave an angelic smile, skipped ahead, and, with a hiss of decompressing seals, the rear hatch slid open. She jumped inside, her boots clicking on polished black alloy. Strap in. Anton exchanged a glance with his son. Is this the part where we die? At least it's better than dying from sickness, Ivan muttered. In transit. The interior of the skimmer was surprisingly serene. No rattling. No wind. Only the steady hum of fusion engines and the shifting pitch of grav stabilizers. Ivan was white-knuckled, gripping the seat straps as the world outside blurred into streaks of cloud and color. Is this thing supposed to bank like that? Of course, Lily called from the pilot's seat, a grin in her voice. Anti-inertial counter-rotators. They let me pull tight turns without turning your bones into soup. Anton groaned quietly. Those rotators are definitely not working. My insides already feel like soup. Lily swiveled the pilot's seat mid-flight to glance back at them. Don't worry. I passed my flight test. In VR. Only crashed 3 times. Ivan opened his mouth, then closed it again. How many times have you flown this thing in real life? Well, with this, that makes twice, she replied with a sheepish smile. A hard turn sent them tilting sideways. Gravity momentarily twisted in their stomachs. A few seconds passed, then the skimmer leveled, the engine tone shifting again. We're transitioning to transcontinental cruise mode. Lily announced cheerfully. We'll be home in 3 hours. Ivan muttered, if we survive. The drop-wing skimmer settled onto a rising platform at Lotus Base around 7:02 a.m. with barely a whisper, steam hissing around its landing struts. The hatch opened. Ivan stumbled out like a man reborn. I will never complain about commercial flights again. Anton descended more slowly, his steps calmer. His color was better. Breathing steady. There were no guards. No checkpoints. Only a set of steel doors that slid open as they approached, revealing a hallway bathed in sterile white light and lined with smooth hexagonal panels. The walls murmured faintly with distant machine song. Lily led them forward without a word. The hallway opened into a large, circular chamber, half cathedral, half laboratory. 3 young women stood at a central dais, dressed in crimson robes. Surgical instruments floated in the air beside them, suspended in perfect orbit by gravitic tethers. Luthar stood at the center. His robes today were darker, deep black threaded with silver veins, and in one hand, he held a stylus dripping with molten data, sketching glowing symbols into the air. The room thrummed with logic and intent. He looked up the moment Lily entered. Ah. You've returned, Luthar said. The 3 girls stepped back in unison. 2 bowed. One whispered something in binaric and returned to adjusting a disassembled servo skull. Ivan muttered, creepy. Lily gave a playful salute. Mission accomplished. No kidnappings, no violence, only mild air sickness. Luthar's gaze shifted to Anton, scanning him from top to bottom. I am glad you accepted the lattice, he said. Anton nodded. Your offer was too tempting to ignore. I can breathe easier now, with just a bit of your medicine. I can only imagine what else you're capable of. Satisfied, Luthar turned to the younger Vanko. I see you came. Ivan shrugged. Did I have any choice? I still have to observe my father. Luthar studied him, measuring, not judging. You will do more than observe. Ivan frowned but said nothing. Lily slid between them with a bright grin. He's still thawing out. Give him a minute. Luthar didn't argue. Accommodations have been prepared. You'll both begin orientation in the afternoon. Orientation. Ivan repeated warily. Before I teach you anything, you must understand the Adeptus Mechanicus and your place in the cult of the machine. I must be certain you will not abuse the knowledge you are given. Both father and son glanced around, at the floating skulls, the half-metal zombie servants, and the eerie calm of the place. Abuse of knowledge, Ivan muttered. A bit ironic, coming from a guy whose hallway looks like a demon castle. Anton whispered back, better to work for a demon than to die in some unknown corner of the world. Ivan finally asked the question he had been holding back. I don't think you brought us here just to worship your god and give us free technology. What's the real reason? Luthar gestured, and a hologram shimmered to life, an armored battlesuit, humanoid, its surface a lattice of interlocking plates. Energy conduits pulsed faintly across its frame. To build this, he said simply. Anton leaned forward, eyes narrowing. A suit? Like armor. Not just armor, Luthar replied. I am taking inspiration from alien wargear. This will serve as a perfect frame for low-level soldiers, but I don't have time to build them. Ivan crossed his arms. You could have grabbed any scientist with a degree. Because I do not need scientists, Luthar said calmly. I need hands willing to work without asking the wrong questions. Hands that understand machines, not theories. Anton hesitated. Let me guess, you want an arc reactor for this armor? I don't need your arc reactors, Luthar said, slicing the assumption apart with his tone. It's not useful for me, I will build a new power source, stronger, and beyond this world's limitations. Ivan stared at the hologram. So, we're just here to help you build this armor. You may see it that way, Luthar said evenly. If your work satisfies me, I will move you to projects far greater than this. Fail, you would just become a low-level worker with no future. Silence followed, broken only by the low hum of machines. Chapter 132, TPM Chapter 130, Orientation and Orders. Author's note, sorry for you interruption but because of last comment and the review my mind is quite confused to how to make a story for interesting the result is I cannot longer write after the chapter 175 currently I am stuck in a chapter 176 across probably in 1 or 2 days I would able to push it but the problem is mind have become normally I would have ignored the complaint but since my pattern members are also dropping I need to think out to fix the situation of this novel if you guys have suggestions would like to listen if not then I might have to slow down the updating the chapter. Chapter 130, Orientation and Orders. The Vankos followed Luthar down a narrow corridor deep into the earth. The air grew cooler, tinged with a faint metallic taste, like the breath of some ancient machine. Soft red lights traced patterns along the walls, illuminating reliefs of cogwheels and alien script that seemed to shift when not directly looked at. Welcome to the workshop, Luthar said, his voice carrying easily in the enclosed space. This will be your world for the foreseeable future. The corridor opened into a cavernous chamber, larger than any workshop they had ever seen. Platforms hovered silently on magnetic rails. Robotic arms moved in precise synchrony, welding plates to skeletal frames of machines Anton could barely comprehend. Suspended across the room were half-formed battlesuits, each in a different assembly stage, hanging like metallic corpses from gravitic harnesses. Ivan stopped in his tracks. This is a workshop. A nursery, Luthar corrected. A place where machines are born. Anton, regaining some composure, asked, and, what exactly is our part in all this? You will develop the mark I frame, Luthar said, hands clasped behind his back. You will combine your engineering knowledge with the data I provide. Just make sure not to create any autonomous artificial intelligence, only pilot-assisted functions. I do not allow soulless machines to think. Ivan frowned. So, no AI. Got it. And the power source? A new one, Luthar said evenly. I will finalize it within a few days. I already possess several prototypes. Your task is simple, build a functional, stable frame. If you succeed, you will be the first humans to create something that is 1,000 years ahead of this planet's technology. Anton nodded slowly, more intrigued than intimidated. And if we fail? Then your usefulness ends, Luthar said without a hint of hesitation. Lily bounced past with a datapad nearly as big as she was. Don't worry. He says that to everyone. Mostly. Ivan muttered, comforting. Luthar gestured toward a hexagonal-lit workstation. 2 half-complete exosuit torsos rested there, humming softly. You will start by redesigning the skeletal frame and stabilizing the core housing. Schematics will arrive in stages. Complete each step to my satisfaction. Anton examined the alien blueprints hovering above the workstation. This is nothing like anything I've ever seen. These designs come from my family's collection, Luthar said, his tone almost reverent. Some of this technology is older than every nation on your maps. The soft whirring of servo skulls filled the chamber. Have fun building your doomsday toys. Lily clap. And maybe build a tiny one for me. With a mischievous wink, she followed Luthar out, leaving the Vankos to their new reality. Anton was already sketching modifications in his notebook, while Ivan leaned on a railing, trying, and failing, to ignore the floating skulls that occasionally circled him. Outside the workshop, Luthar walked alongside Lily through the observation corridor. The hum of the base followed them like a mechanical heartbeat. I need you to monitor them, Luthar said quietly. Anton's loyalty will hinge on gratitude, but Ivan will resist as long as he thinks he still has control. You want me to babysit? Lily tilted her head, eyes sparkling. Monitor, Luthar corrected. I have embedded nanobombs during their treatment. Which would be useful when the time comes. Lily blinked, then grinned. Wow, didn't expect somebody would put boom inside a medicine. Just keep an eye on them, Luthar said, voice cold and certain. Let them believe they are safe. I can do that, she said cheerfully, hopping ahead. I would make sure to watch over them like a cat that watches over the milk. Luthar's gaze turned distant. Good. I have other matters to attend to. My attention will soon return to the dungeon world. Shield HQ, 3:40 a.m., earlier. The air in the command room was heavy with unease. Screens projected stills of Brock Rumlow, once a trusted field commander, now part machine. Black alloy traced his arms and neck, synthetic servos twitched beneath his skin. Maria Hill's voice was clipped. He's enhanced. Extensively. And he hasn't reported a single thing. Nick Fury leaned forward, his one eye narrowing. If Rumlow was still ours, he'd have asked for approval. No agent takes that kind of upgrade without clearance. Not unless they are ready to betray. Kara hasn't reported either, Hill said grimly. No pings. No exfil requests. It's like they don't care about S.H.I.E.L.D. anymore. Fury growled. Then they're not ours anymore. The question is, what made them switch? A second monitor lit up, showing the dropwing skimmer streaking through Russian skies. Hill tapped the screen. The same one that brought Tony Stark back into America now, the craft brought the Vankos out of Russia. The only people besides Stark who can build an arc reactor. Fury's expression hardened. That's men now, they would have technology to build armors which are similar to Tony Stark. While Fury was misunderstanding Luthar's action, there was a place where paranoia spread like a disease. In a dimly lit room, Hydra's inner circle watched encrypted feeds. Rumlow walked through a battlefield with machine-like precision, captured by distant cameras. He doesn't answer, hissed one operative. Which means Hydra has been compromised. Another operative shook his head. This is going to be a big problem. The room went silent. The third said, finally. Maybe this is a good opportunity to recruit a new member, since that person hasn't revealed our information, it means we still have a chance to become friends with him. A smile curved his lips. Once he joins, all our goals would be easier, regardless of taking over the world or protecting the world from other forces, everything would become easy. Listening to this, everyone's eyes started to shine, completely ignoring the fact that Luthar had no reason to join them.